Thank you for joining us for the Board of Education meeting on February the 8th. We appreciate everybody coming in person. We have a number of people in person tonight, and also hopefully a number of people watching. With that being said, I would ask that you would stand for a moment of silence, to be followed by our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Alexis. We do have our alternate here tonight, Alexis Schaefer. Thank you, Alexis, for joining us. Appreciate you coming on the spur of the moment. And we hopefully
Speedy recovery.
Speedy recovery. We're going to move right into our different recognitions. The first one we're going to have is the Christmas card, artwork recognition. Miss Samantha Keller is the young lady who provided us with the Christmas card this year. Beautiful Christmas card. In fact, my wife still has it up.
I know, it is beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Absolutely, I love the.
We've asked Ms. Brinker to make that presentation on behalf of the board. Yeah, beautiful.
We would like to recognize Miss Samantha Keller, a 10th grade student in Northern Garrett High, for her artwork that was selected for the 2021 Garrett County Board of Education Public Schools Holiday Card. We have with you our art teacher, Mr. James Paxton, and your and how it is as the art teachers submit many different pieces of artwork, and it's a really hard decision. And everyone here votes. There's never a name on them, and you vote, and the one that got that most is the majority of the votes this year. So congratulations. Thank you. You're welcome.
And we have a photo. Do you want to say anything about your thought process or anything else about the card?
Not really.
Well, I think we asked if we could add the 2021 on the bumper, and you, of course, said that would be wonderful, and I thought it just was such a nice special touch, and I just thought it was an absolutely lovely card this year, so thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Paxton, for guiding the process, and I think we'll get a picture.
And everybody watching from home can see your artwork.
Yep, on the screen, and then you get to keep your beautiful artwork.
We'll probably need to push in some, I would imagine.
Which way?
Our new official photographer.
I'll just try to angle this way so we get the TV out of the background.
You want, like, the very angle?
Yeah, just come this way.
Good.
Yeah. There's a couple of them. 1, 2, and 3. And another one here. 1, 2, and 3.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
This is her.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Really, it was beautiful. Samantha, congratulations.
I can see it.
Sure, let's take a big crowd of laughs.
That's good, thank you. Good on to another side. Very nice.
Very pretty.
Thanks for letting me do it. I know them.
You know,
Yeah, from the fair.
beautiful.
Her dad and her.
How y'all doing?
Yeah, I absolutely know. It's a hard, Monica's right, it's a hard choice every year. What are we, school counselors, I get it, I can go now.
Our next recognition will be for National School Counseling Week proclamation. I've asked Dr. Paul to make that presentation for us.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. And John Hummel, our Director of Student Services here. John, why don't you introduce all your school counselors?
All right, I have about half of our school counselors here, so great showing. Starting first, Tim Watson, counselor at Grantsville and Crellin. Dawn Moon at Broadford Elementary and Swan Meadow. Katie Fresh, Friendsville Elementary. Connie Glatfeldy at Route 40 and Accent Elementary. Amy Brack at Yawk Glades Elementary, and last but not least, Kelly Davis at Brockford.
Great. So National School Counseling Week is actually this week, February 7th through 11th. And here's our proclamation. Whereas school counselors are employed in public and private schools to help students reach their full potential, and school counselors are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to career awareness and development. And school counselors help parents focus on ways to further the educational, personal, and social growth of their children. And school counselors work with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves. And school counselors seek to identify and utilize community resources that can enhance and complement comprehensive school counseling programs and help students become productive members of society. And comprehensive developmental school counseling programs are considered an integral part of the educational process that enables all students to achieve success in school. Thereby, we do hereby proclaim February 7th through 11th, 2022 as National School Counseling Week. So that's a lot of stuff.
Thank you.
A lot of big words. I have to think about what all that is. Anything else you want to say or highlight about our school counselors?
No, I appreciate everything they do. It's been, you know, their job has changed over the last couple of years with everything going on, where they did a lot of preventive stuff early on. That's usually the role. They're doing a lot of reactive and triage and working with our students and families and communities in a different way. So I appreciate everything, even the ones that aren't here, do as school counselors each and every day for our students.
Any of you have comments? Looks like two microphones. Yeah.
Well, that was last year's bonus.
Well,
So we say.
that's sweet. All right, we're gonna take a picture, so Mark,
So, Mark,
how do you want us to
Arrange
set up here?
this will be practice for when we bring in the, yeah.
You can move.
Put me in front of the bathroom.
You can put the song right
Picture in the
there.
bathroom. I can give it some more. I'll be on the end. Oh, yeah, you guys are, as always. Okay. Thanks. Smile.
One, two, and three. And another one here. One, two, and three. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You make me feel better. Oh, that's all right.
You too.
Thank you all. Join. I'm gonna give each of them one, I would say give you my name.
Thank you.
I can give one to you. Right, okay. Wow. Kept on, sorry. Oh, no.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy your week.
All right, you're up. Ready to go.
Morning, Shelley. I think that's more than we usually. Very good. There they are. I was telling them, because it looked like a whole lot of them were coming in. Are you here for the, track team?
Someone can send my feet.
We got room. You covered.
The camera's there.
All right, I don't got my glasses.
Our next recognition will be the state championship Northern Garrett High School cross-country team. And making that recognition, we have the board of lead, Mr. Van Sickle.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to recognize the Northern Garrett High School cross-country team that captured their second consecutive 1A state title at the Hereford High School in Parkton, Maryland on November 13th, 2021. The team ended a total score of 47 points, beating Smithsburg High School The team boasted 5 all-star performances with 5 runners finishing in the top 20. All 6 of the finishing runners were in the top 30 of the field of 104 runners this year in the state title.
Wow.
Lydia Nelson, I'd like to congratulate you. She was first and actually our state champion here hosted in Garrett County, Maryland. So congratulations. Over the season, the girls were able to capture 7 team championships, winning the Wildcat Invitational in Williamsport, the Scorpion Crawl in Oakland Mills High School, the West Mac Championship at the New Germany, and the Husky Pride Invitational at Northern, and the Region 1A West Meet at Smithsburg. 1A State Meet, and they ended the season and the team enjoyed winning with the winning streak, with Lydia Nelson winning 3 meets during the season, the West Mac Championship, the Husky Pride Invitational, and the 1A State Meet. Congratulations, girls, on everything you've done this season.
Awesome.
Ms. Baker is going to send out, call out your name, and I'm going to give you guys some recognition here.
Carissa Amtower. I'm sure I probably messed up your first name.
Raise your hand, right in front of me.
Minka Amtower. How bad did I mess it up? You got it. All right. Oh, Ashlyn Anderson.
There you go.
Allison Barlow. Oh. Kylie Barnes. I don't even know these. I can read them off the. Kaylee Bowser. Sophia Brown. Hannah Good. Right back there. Emma Hofstetler. Jacqueline Jacobs. Leah McKenzie. Lydia Nelson. Ava Rankin. Nicole Savage. Mackenzie Uphold. Isabella Yoder. And coaches, Jaron Hawkins. Sean Peck. And Pebbles Perez. That's the last one. And whoever and here's for Lydia, for her, she gets a special.
Lydia, for your achievement for winning the state title, there is a framed certificate to congratulate you on your win. Congratulations.
Okay. And then whoever's standing in the middle, I put that for the picture. And we'll definitely have to scrunch in. And then. I love it. Will that get it out of the picture? You might have to. You might have down your knees. Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Thank you.
Here, even somebody, yeah, can. You have to get down a little bit so you see the ones in the back. Good, whatever.
Everybody ready here? All right. 1, 2, and 3. Do another one. 1, 2, 3. Do the third one for good measure. All right.
We're glad you were able to work it out to come this month, and thank you so much. Do you have anything you wanted to share?
No, just, it's a great group of girls. You know, they don't boast or brag when they win, and they look forward. If things don't go well, and they're just great representatives of themselves, their parents, their school, and their county.
Great.
Awesome. Wonderful, well said, thank you. Thank you so much.
Good job.
We all appreciate it. All right.
Oh, thank you. I wouldn't, this is the first thing, I would've had to go look for them somewhere. How are you? Thanks, guys.
All right.
How are you? Oh, thank you.
I'm trying to get more on my walk.
Yeah, a couple days.
Take care, be careful.
Come here. There's so many people.
Right. Very. And also, very nice.
How are you?
The background, please.
I got it. I got your back.
Okay, well, I wish we could say that was the end of the evening, but unfortunately, the evening is just starting. Wonderful, wonderful those recognitions. Okay, at this moment, I'll take a motion to adopt the agenda as stated. Motion by Dr. Paul, seconded by Ms. Van Sickle. Those in favor of the agenda as stated, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it is unanimous. The January 11th public session minutes, are there any concerns or changes to those minutes that anyone would like to note? Hearing none, I'll take a motion as such. Dr. Paul makes the motion, second by Mr. Van Sickle to adopt. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And the minutes are adopted. I ask Superintendent Baker to give us the closed session summaries and announcements.
Okay. Definitely, Mr. Hoover.
I'm sorry, thank you again. Help me out. Our legal counsel is not present with us this evening, physically, but he is on the phone. Mr. Hoover was a little bit under the weather himself, so he is joining us remotely from his home. So thank you, Brandon, for being with us.
Thanks for allowing me to attend by phone.
Okay. All right, so these are the closed session summaries. The Board of Education met in executive session on Tuesday, January 11th, 2022 at 4:06 p.m. under Authority 3-305 of the General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland to discuss the following items. Review executive session minutes, personnel topics pursuant to 3-305B1, negotiation topics pursuant to 3-305B9, and administrative function topics. Monica Rinker made a motion to move to executive session, and Rodney Glotfelty seconded the motion. Thereafter, the board unanimously voted to close the session with a yay vote from Rodney Glotfelty, Matthew Paul, Monica Rinker, and Jason Van Sickle. Mr. Wood stated there was an addition to the agenda. Matthew Paul made a motion to approve the revised executive session agenda, and Monica Rinker seconded the motion. Thereafter, the board unanimously voted to approve the revised agenda with a yay vote from Rodney Glotfelty, Matthew Paul, Monica Rinker, and Jason Van Sickle. The topics discussed in closed session included the following. Executive session minutes from December 14th, 2021. Matthew Paul made a motion to approve the minutes, and Monica Rinker seconded the motion. Final resolution, motion carried with yay votes from Monica Rinker, Rodney Glotfelty, Matthew Paul, and Jason Van Sickle. December 15th, 2021, executive session minutes. Rodney Glotfelty made a motion to approve the minutes, and Matthew Paul seconded the motion. The final resolution, the motion carried with yay votes from Monica Rinker, Rodney Glotfelty, Matthew Paul, and Jason Van Sickle. Negotiations, the Garrett County Employee Healthcare Trust updates by Dr. Jane Wilson and Mrs. Allison Schweitzer provided an update regarding the Employee Healthcare Trust. Salary modeling for blueprint compliance. Mrs. Schweitzer and Dr. Wilson shared salary modeling for compliance with the blueprint for Maryland's future legislation. The board discussed these negotiation-related topics, but did not take action on them. Personnel, superintendent evaluation. The board discussed the superintendent evaluation as well as the superintendent strategic planning report. Administrative function. The board discussed various administration function topics. The board considered these topics but did not take any action on these items. The board recessed the meeting at 6:05 p.m. to return to public session. The board returned to executive session at 9:10 p.m. to discuss the personnel topic. Matthew Paul made a motion to close executive session, and Jason Van Sickle seconded the motion. The motion carried with yea votes from Monica Rinker, Rodney Glotfelty, Matthew Paul, and Jason Van Sickle. The executive session ended at 10:57 p.m. Mr. Tom Woods, Board President, Mr. Rodney Glotfelty, Board Vice President, and Board members Dr. Matthew Paul, Mrs. Monica Rinker, and Mr. Jason Van Sickle were in attendance. Also in attendance for part or all of the meeting were Mrs. Barbara Baker, Superintendent, Mr. Brandon Hoover, Board Attorney, Dr. Jane Wilderson, Director of Human Resources, Dr. Nicole Miller, Chief Academic Officer, Ms. Allison Schweitzer, Director of Finance, Mr. Richard Wazlowski, Director of Maintenance, Facilities, Operations, and Transportation, and Ms. Karen Brewer, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent. Announcements: on February 9th, there'll be a May Board Service Academy on the budget process. It'll be virtual if anyone would like to attend. Notify Ms. Brewer. Staff Development Day on February 18th. Students will be dismissed 3 hours early. Schools will be closed on President's Day, February 21st. February 24th, there is a May Board Service Academy, successfully building and navigating the superintendent board relationship during stressful times. Virtual meeting, 9:30 to 12:30. If you'd like to attend, let Mrs. Brewer know. And March 3rd, is the third grading period progress reports already. So that would be the conclusion of the announcement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our new business, last day for seniors, it's an action item. Are you presenting that, or is Mr. Edwards?
I don't know if Mrs. Edwards was ready to, but you certainly can if you'd like to present this item.
You'll have to remind me what day I.
Well,
I think it was June 1st. That is the reciprocal date of last year in relation to graduation day. All testing, everything's final by that point. Both principals agree with that date.
And we'll be set for graduation on June 4th, 2022, with this date of June 1st being the last day for seniors.
Correct.
I recommend the board accept June 1st, 2022 as the last day for seniors.
Okay, there was a recommendation to accept June 1st as last day for seniors.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Matthew. Here's a second. Second by Rodney. Discussion?
That's okay.
Any discussion? Hearing none, there's a motion on the floor. That June 1st will be the last day for seniors. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And it is approved.
All right, you seniors, June 1st, last day.
Did you say graduation was the 4th?
It is the 4th, yes, 2022, coming up soon.
Budget transfer request, Ms. Schweitzer.
Good evening. I'm here to present and to request the board approve a budget transfer of $137,050 from instructional salary to capital outlay. All the projects are laid out here. We have Yacht Glades playground upgrade. We need $25,000 as the match for Project Open Space. There was a fencing project at Southern High School athletic field for $62,050. And then the Northern High parking lot paving and lighting project did go over the estimated cost by about $50,000.
Superintendent Baker, you have a recommendation?
Yes, I'd recommend that we approve the balance transfer request as presented by Mrs. Schweitzer.
Okay, there is a recommendation of superintendent to approve. Do I hear a motion as such? Motion by Dr. Paul, second by Mr. Van Sickle. Can I have discussion? Any discussion about the budget transfer? Yes, ma'am.
Because none of these are completed yet, we need to have this money approved for them to be completed, is that correct?
The Southern High School fencing is complete,
Okay,
and the other two projects are not complete at this time.
okay. And initially, I had something written down with our Yacht Glade playground. Was part of the funding through QDAP?
Project Open Space.
Okay. Great. And then you had let us know about Southern High School athletic field fencing back in July. You told us we need a budget transfer. So it looks like it's a little bit more than what, I guess, the price we was told then to now. I guess with the inflection of things going up, inflation.
I think there was a small change order.
Okay.
I think it might have been like $4,000, $4,050.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think it was like $59,175 I initially written down. And I had written down, I just have one more question, just for clarification, I understand that the Northern High School parking lot and light project, we had a paper one time said phase 1 was lights and then we'll have another phase after that, is that correct? Like, for bleachers or something? You know?
For
I know it's not
the
on
parking
here.
lot?
Yeah, was there,
Okay,
was there
bleachers
money?
aren't part of the parking lot, but there will be another phase
That's what I
to the
mean.
parking lot that'll wrap around to be near the athletic complex
Uh-huh,
and up towards Northern Middle School, and that'll be part of the budget request for capital for FY '23. So that's not part of this. This was when Mr. Wozlowski, brought the bid to the board for approval. All of the bids came in over the $250,000 that was allotted, for the lighting. And so this is to, cover the purchase order that is in our system right now for the lighting. The paving is already complete.
so this amount of money, then we'll finish that project then, correct?
Yes.
The Northern High parking lot and light project. Okay. Thank you.
Just the first phase, not the second.
Right.
Well,
Just the first.
what we have written down here, phase 2 will be additional different parking lot.
In behind, right, I just wanna make sure that is not complete, it completes this phase.
Any other questions? Well, fortunately, we had enough, budget variance on the positive side that we could pay for everything. Worked out great. Okay, there is a motion on the floor in a second. Those in favor of the budget transfer, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. And it is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion. Assessment results and strategies, to address the learning loss of mathematics. Flip.
While they're getting that presentation up on screen, you know, for a number of years, we presented assessment results to the board. The board indicated this year that they really want to focus on the second step, and that is addressing the strategies of learning loss, not just the results. And so tonight we have a couple of slides that are system-wide changes in practice to address the learning gaps, and then we're going to focus on tonight on mathematics on those strategies. So I will turn it over to our Chief Academic Officer to introduce the first couple of slides.
Sure. Good evening. So tonight we're going to take more of a deep dive into the ESSA Consolidated Plan that you heard about several months ago when we presented kind of a 30,000-foot view of our strategic instructional plan. And we're really looking at, let me get to the first slide here, system-wide systemic changes that we're looking at changing our practice, and the goal of that changed practice is obviously to close the learning gaps and improve student achievement. So we're looking at what are we doing to enhance best practices that we were already doing, and what are we adding new as far as best practices that we know have a high probability of effectiveness with students to close learning gaps. So these first two slides are kind of an overarching synopsis of what we are doing system-wide as far as a change in practice. So it applies to more subjects than just math. So you can see our first bullet is that we are focusing on having increased access and the use of disaggregated data by student group specific to targeted skills aligned to instruction. That hasn't been as robust in prior years. We have some requirements with our ESSER funding and our recovery funding, as well as through ESSA, to really look at our disaggregated data to ensure that we have equity across all of our student groups. And so we're really looking at providing more access to disaggregated data. We have some new platforms that we're using. One of them is the iReady platform that you will hear about tonight from Mr. Schultz. We have increased centrally distributed data. So oftentimes that comes from Mr. Schultz and Ms. Moss because they're working in the content specialty areas. But we're focused on getting that data to the school level and ensuring school level access. Another example of this would be the Pearson Access, which is our statewide program. Our state superintendent has a focus on ensuring that the data that comes from state tests
get down to the level that you need it to be able to use it for instructional purposes. So ensuring that it's as close to the student as possible. In the past, it's been highly centralized throughout the state, and so there's initiatives now to build that down to the school level, to the teacher level. We are just in the initial phases of that. We've started it with 5th and 8th grade science with our science teachers, but we'll be building that through the rest of the spring semester as we get into the spring MCAP testing for ELA, math, and some of the other subjects. The Pearson platform is providing, so far, from what we've been able to gather, very specific detail that will really help guide instruction. So those are just some examples, but that is definitely an increased focus. We're also looking at transitioning all of our resources to fully vetted, evidence-based programs. So prior to the pandemic, we did not have very many options for interventions for mathematics. So when students were not successful in the core programs, when we were providing interventions, we didn't always have evidence-based vetted programs to be able to implement. So tonight you're going to hear about one that we have adopted, newly adopted after the pandemic, to be able to address that gap. We're also looking at some pre-K curriculum, and moving forward, we know we have to address our math curriculum as a whole for the core program to ensure that that is fully vetted so that our resources are in line with the expectations for where we want students to be performing. There's an increased intentional monitoring of our strategic initiatives specific to how we're implementing at the school level. So we have coaches, principals, supervisors, directors, teachers, we're all working together to make sure that we are implementing the targeted strategies in the best practices with fidelity. And the part of that that's important is to ensure that when there are needs, that there's support in place to be able to help teachers and their students get to the level of implementation that we want them to be at. We have the Schoology platform that we did not have before the pandemic. It is a very robust platform that allows for a variety of uses, and one use is to really allow us to share resources and communicate best practices with our staff. So you're going to hear tonight from Mr. Shilp about some shell courses, but in ELA we have resource pages to be accessible to all of our teachers in order to help build access and capacity specific to all these programs and strategies. We have an increased school level improvement plan monitoring that the LEAD team is implementing. We're gearing up for mid-year conferences, basically. As many of you probably know, we just did mid-year assessments on our students countywide, but local assessments. We have high school state assessments going on as well. But our LEAD team will be meeting with all the school level teams, principals as a representative of the school, to go over where they stand and where they're tracking and their goals specific to the school level. We have a greater instructional focus on principal PLCs, specific to using data, looking at disseminating countywide data, progress monitoring, recommendations. Those conversations are becoming much more instructionally driven. We have several additional added staffing that goes along with our intervention that has been possible through a variety of grants that were not in place prior to the pandemic. So that includes tutoring, extended learning opportunities. We have additional IAs for kindergarten, and there's others, but those are some examples. We have been able to include increased PLC time, our professional learning communities, which is critical. We have this disaggregated data, and we have this more rich, high-quality data source that we're using, teachers need to have time to be able to review that data, go over it, and analyze it for instructional implications, and then build the instructional process from there. So we have added time built in so that teachers can identify those gaps using the more robust data and provide the appropriate responses. We also looked at the instructional time at the elementary level to ensure that we had enough time to address the iReady personalized pathway and increase time for math, and also added a GCPS coach as well for math that works closely with Mr. Schultz.
Question, Dr. Owens?
I have two. When you look at, just one down, analysis of instructional times elementary level to provide more math instructional time. So I guess I'm wondering, how are we going to find more time for the teachers? Their day's probably already booked, you know what I mean, full. How do you provide more math? I'm just curious, like, how do we do that?
So it's prioritizing and looking at all the different subjects and ensuring that we have the appropriate amount of time for each subject area, and also using our RTI time to the highest level to be able to ensure that we get some additional time for iReady pathways. So I don't know, Donna, if you want to add anything?
No, I agree with that. It's just like I did an observation yesterday in the school. They do a lot of that. They can do that during part of their tiered instructions. The teachers are pulling some students back independently while the other kids are working on iReady. And it seems to be bringing success, especially Mr. Schultz was able to share some of that data that when they get that time in, we're seeing an increase.
Yeah,
And then my other question, when you look at slide, the one before this and this slide, I guess if you're a parent and you're watching, like, this is wonderful what all you're doing for the gaps, the changes, but like that's kind of teacher terms, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a parent watching, you might not understand what some of this means, so maybe say 2 or 3 things that a parent would understand. You know, like you have,
well, we want to make sure that we have the best instructional resources in front of our students. So that we equate in our world to vetted and evidence-based, that it's the richest curriculum, the richest resource that we can use to best meet our student needs. And as far as data, we have numerous data sources that we use. We always look at multiple pieces of data when we make instructional decisions. So the data, when I'm talking about disaggregated data, we're looking at data by student group, as well as all students, as well as individual students. So in the past, maybe we would have only had access to all students and individual students. Now we can look at how are the special education students doing? How are the students with English learner services doing? How are students that qualify for free and reduced meals doing? So we can look more strategically at students and ensure that we have appropriate supports in place.
And I'll take this bullet on higher quality data sources permitting more targeted response to intervention to close gaps. So I would equate that to a prescription. So each child now has a prescription dedicated to them that allows for that differentiation term that we throw around all the time that the teacher didn't have to generate. So after the student takes the diagnostic, we get the prescription, and then the kid goes into iReady, and those lessons are already lined up without necessarily any teacher time devoted to that. So that's a whole step of planning and process that takes that off the teacher's plate and actually does it for the full room now. And the kids that are going to RTI, the RTI teacher, not that we want to limit communication, but the amount of communication necessary between the person delivering the RTI services and the classroom teacher is actually diminished because they now have both access to that prescription, and without having to have additional communication, where we're struggling to find time for that. So they can both kind of dig into that resource and know what they need to do for that individual student, and not have to touch bases often. So,
Thank
yep.
With that, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Schultz. He's gonna share some specifics about mathematics strategies.
All right, so back again, right? All right, so this is about the strategies that we're using to improve some of the data points that we talked about the last time. So the first one is full and efficient implementation of math talk slide decks, which I'll go into detail in a moment. The shell courses and the math teacher leader program, which Dr. Miller just spoke about, and then obviously the iReady diagnostic, the personalized instruction, My Path resource, and then the tools for instruction, which goes beyond. Okay, so the first one is the math talk slide decks, and I wanted to provide a little background on this because typically, you know, state of Maryland is a very competitive place on the educational front, right? There wasn't a ton of sharing pre-pandemic, but as we were exiting the pandemic, you found counties loosening up on resources that they were willing to share with others. This resource comes from Calvert County's math office. They built it over a series of years. I began reviewing it with a set of teachers in the spring last year when they offered it up to the rest of the state for use. As I looked at the body of work, I mean, if I sat down to recreate it with GCPS teachers, it would take us just countless hours, summers, PD. It'd be a multi-year process. So I had our teachers look at it. Initial responses were great. Showed it to principals. I mean, Calvert County scores speak for themselves on bullet 3 here. You know, pre-pandemic, they were one of the highest performing districts in the state for math 3 through 8. They put some of their success into this resource, or they attributed some of their success. I was able to meet these supervisors in person at the MAG conference this year, after we've already implemented the slide decks in our classrooms. And just they rave about the way that they've been able to see their teachers grow with this resource over time. And they started back in 2015. So when somebody builds something and uses it with their own teachers and has multiple years to vet it or to go through it, they've made all the edits. They've made upgrades to it. So that's another good reason to grab it and share it with our teachers. You're going to see some examples in a moment. The goal of these is to have kids brainstorming ideas and discussing out loud from their perspective what they're seeing and the problems that they're attempting to solve. Less teacher talk. We want to see the teachers put up the slides, follow the directions in the routine, and ask the students, how do you know that? And then have them support the answers that they give. Okay, which leads to better performance on modeling and reasoning questions when you see those on the MCAT. If you can't brainstorm about how to solve the problem, how do you even begin to write about it, right? So there are 9 routines that change by the grade bands. Some of those names up there won't mean anything to you, but we'll see some examples here in a second. So why the importance of number sense routines? I'm not going to sit here and read the paragraph to you, but I did bold out that last sentence, which I think is the most important. Is number sense development encourages students to think flexibly and promotes confidence with numbers, right? We focus so much energy, as we should, in the primary grades on reading that early numeracy sometimes gets left behind, and we want to discuss math openly just as much as we do reading. So what is a number sense routine? Well, it's any routine, especially in elementary school, you're going to provide that structure for students so they can follow along, that they understand what the routine is, they will participate more over time, they'll feel safe to discuss out loud, especially if we're doing this every day. If we take the opportunity to actually go through it with students, more people will be comfortable in participating. So this is an example of a same but different routine. Every routine has a rationale and an information slide. So when you think about the professional development necessary to implement this, it's really not, there's not a lot, right? A teacher can pick this up, read this first slide, do the same but different routine with their students, and then they're going to see a same but different in each set of slides that they go through. And this is really set up to really help an educator that's never seen this resource before. Just follow these instructions and you'll be able to facilitate this discussion. This is another example of the prep slides that precede the actual slide the student will see. So every slide has expected responses. Again, less teacher prep time. The teacher doesn't have to look at it and analyze and think about what do they have to, or what the primary goal is with this slide. What are the best responses? Again, a lot of time devoted to this resource. And then this is the slide that students would see, right? So basically, if this was to happen perfectly, the teacher will put this up on the smart board using the projector and just say to the class, after they're familiar with this routine, how are these same but different? And then you would just wait for those answers to start to roll off. And again, I have the expected responses that were built into this resource. And these are things that the teacher would be looking for, right? These are different examples of the types of routines. So we have another same but different up in the upper left-hand corner, and it's using manipulatives that we would normally use, place value blocks. Quick count is a model, mimicking an array. So the one with the ducks, students are used to seeing those to quick count or to learn early multiplication skills. And you can see everything up on the screen is highly visible. So they're very engaging. When the students see them, they're excited to go into the opportunity. The favorite in the primary grades is definitely the splat, which is in the lower right-hand corner. So the way that happens is those yellow Post-its slowly appear. Sometimes they'll count the blue dots very quickly, or they'll be given the number, like 5 is up there now, and then the splat will hit the screen, and then they have to explain how they know what's under the splat. So in this case, we'd be looking to get the answer number 3, but also have the kids give it to us an equation as well, like 2 minus what under this, or 2 plus under the splat would equal 5, and then they have an opportunity to reverse that. So held that too long. Okay, all right. So I sent out a teacher survey recently because I'm trying to monitor. I see them when I go around for observations. I see them when I'm doing informal walkthroughs in buildings. I hear from the kids that they're doing them when I get into buildings. But I really wanted to get some feedback from teachers. This went to K through 5. The slides are in pre-K, but for the purpose of monitoring all 3 bullets that I talked about at the beginning of this, all 3 strategies, K through 5 is really my primary focus right now in this, this first real year back in school. So teachers reported completing on average 67 slides. 75% of the teachers K through 5 reported completing 3 or more per week, and 30% of teachers K through 5 reported completion of 2 or 3 slides per week. We just hit the 91st day not too long ago, so 67 on average is not too bad for me. Some people are obviously out in front of that and right on target, and some folks are slowly lagging behind. The way that the resources are shared, they're in Schoology. So those PowerPoints are broken down by date ranges because there are 180 slides for each grade level. Mr. Glasfeldy, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
When you roll this out, you have goals or objectives that they need to meet. And do you have timelines when they have to meet them? And you have, I'm just...
No, yeah, that's a great question. So the goal, there's 180 per grade level. So we have 180 days of school schedule, and the goal was to try to implement and do every day. Now, it's brand new for folks. Ms. Rinker just asked a question about time and math. Like everyone's worry at the beginning of the year was, where am I putting this, right? And when you introduce anything new, the first time you do that same but different routine, it's going to take you 15 to 20 minutes to get it clear with the kids, especially grade 1, grade 2. Some teachers had to get over that. Now they can put a same but different slide and they're finished in the 5 to 10 minutes that it should take. But we had a little hiccups coming out of the gate, right? So folks were, taking way too long to implement. And then as the kids learned the routines, as the teachers became comfortable with routines, it's picking up more. Okay, this is the first time that I've surveyed them for where they officially are, and I got an individual number for every person, you know, that completed the survey. It's showing me that we are moving forward, and they are picking up the pace right now, but there's definitely room for growth. And I'll continue to ask now that I have this first data, like where are they in the process? So, yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's good to have a framework that they see, this is what the expectations are. And you probably ought to have something, you know, if you think there's gonna be implementation problems, what steps are you gonna take to make sure that they're implemented? So everybody's aware of that, the principals, the teachers, and so they're all working together and trying to meet that.
Yes.
And gotta get buy-in from them too.
No, absolutely. And the reason I passed these out to teachers last year before even considering rolling them out was to get that excitement going. And it's something I didn't mention, but Calvert County had not produced a kindergarten set. So I pulled our kindergarten teachers in over the summer and had them look at the grade 1 and the pre-K set, and we made our own kindergarten set. So they were excited about that because they were able to borrow routines from both grade levels and kind of make their own creation out of that. So I definitely got buy-in from kindergarten right out of the gate because they made those. Other folks, you know, absolutely. And again, it's a work in progress. Some strategies we've given folks is if you are behind and you know you're 2-hour delay day and kids are coming in slower in the rotation, put a slide routine up if you're behind schedule. Do 2 or 3 during breakfast. If you're waiting for a presentation to happen in the cafeteria and you're waiting to be called down by the main office, do 2 or 3 slide deck routines. Instead of, or buses are late today, do 2 or 3 slide deck routines to catch back up and get back on schedule. So we've tried to provide as many creative solutions to get people back on track. So, this is anecdotal evidence, right? I left these anonymous. I didn't have time to reach out to these teachers, but I asked for comments from everybody, and I got a whole lot. The stuff that was bolded at the top were common phrases that I saw in everybody's comments: improved conversations, increased use of math vocabulary, and increased participation, which I think is also important when we're talking about math discussions in class. I'm not going to read these quotes to you, but they are very positive, and I know my peers to not be positive unless they want to be positive. So the fact that we got positive quotes back is a good sign. Strategy 2 was the Math Teacher Leader Program and the Schoology Shell courses. Kindergarten to Algebra 1 was the goal out of the gate. So 1 math teacher leader was identified per grade level, and 2 actually for Algebra 1, but initially we were going to pick 1. Teachers come from schools all across the county. I did my best effort to make sure that there was at least 1 in every school. That did not end up being the case, and that was based on the applications we received for these positions. GCPS, so the teacher is in charge of, which you're going to see in just a second, pacing, establishing pacing with the core curriculum, providing their own personal lesson guidance on what they are doing in the classroom with the core curriculum. We post focus strategies for specific topics. So Amy Warnick created some mini units that we pushed out to these shell courses. And then there are supplemental resources. And then all of our GCPS guidance documents are housed in these courses, MCAP resources, and iReady resources as well. And the icons at the below are like, now no student and parent can see these courses. These courses are dedicated to educators, right? These are an educator resource course. So this is an example of Rhonda Schweitzer, who is our grade 1. And to the left on this slide is the communication that she posts. She's really good about just touching base every week. Hey, this is what I've posted. This is where I am in the curriculum. Check out this resource. And then the image to the right is the way that most of the courses K through 5 are organized. So you have links at the top to our internal documents. You have a couple national resources, an iReady folder. You have the number sense routine document that tells you how to download those and how to play them in PowerPoint. and then the weekly folders that Rhonda sets up. So this is kind of that concept of not trying to recreate the wheel, and especially at the elementary level where we have a lot of brand new teachers. You know, you get dropped in the classroom and you are your sole lesson planner, especially if you are the only person teaching your grade level in your school. So this gives that new teacher an opportunity to look at Rhonda's grade 1 course and just follow right along. And then Rhonda will post the resources in here. And it's not meant to be perfectly scripted. Obviously, the teacher has the autonomy to adapt anything here, but this gives them a base and a starting point of what to do. And the idea for year 2 is really, there's just some editing and some tweaking that starts to happen to this. You know, Rhonda is loading it as we go because she's following her plan book. Next year will be more of an editing process, you know. Okay, so this is for full and efficient implementation and progress monitoring. Again, in the same survey we pushed out regarding the slide decks, we collected information on the use of the shell courses. And you can see that 9% of teachers reported that they visit daily, 58% visited weekly, and 22% visited monthly. 5%, unfortunately, didn't visit at all.
So what's the remedy there with the 5%?
Well, the remedy is it's not a lot of people, and this is the first year for the shell course. So this is data that's going to be shared with the principals, and I think at that point it's a building level discussion. You know, just an opportunity to go check it out. You know, there's got to be it's got to be a defining reason why they haven't visited at all, right? So I think it warrants a conversation. The thing that I am encouraged by is that teachers plan differently. You know that as a former principal, right? Some folks are planned out for 6 months. I wouldn't encourage that, but are planned out for 6 months. Some folks are planned out for 30 days, 2 weeks. The fact that we're visiting monthly and weekly, that's good. You know, daily surprises me. That's probably a lot of the people that were in charge of the course, or they're a brand new teacher, right? And they're just trying to keep head above water right now.
How does this interface with substitutes? You come into the building.
That's a really good question. So this necessarily does not, right? But if I'm a teacher and I know I'm going to be out and I don't have a lesson, like this particular shell course, because these are internal to our educators. You know, if I'm sitting at home, I could pull Rhonda's materials or Rhonda's lessons, copy them to my course in Schoology, and then maybe my substitute at the building level knows how to get my kids on, and then that resource is produced for me. You know, it's just a simple copy over to my course. If I just wanted to grab her stuff and use it that day.
It would seem, comparing it to the old days, that a substitute coming in who has been well versed on how to use Schoology could really have a lot of really valuable lessons. Whereas in some cases, in the old days, the lesson was to keep the class safe.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
The idea. To me, it's extremely encouraging. I mean, I just can't. I told superintendent whenever I get that, extremely encouraging stuff.
Yeah, and I'm not shy about picking up best practices from other districts, right? So Worcester County, another high-performing district in both math and ELA, Christine Danasavich, when I first took over, I talked to her about, like, tell me what's the best things you do. And they had already had Schoology pre-pandemic, and this was one of the things she pointed out. She said, you know, I can't do everything. You know, I'm a small district office. We got a couple people. I got to distribute leadership to the buildings and then let the teachers lead each other. And I thought that was a great way and something that I wanted to bring here. I'll be total transparency. It's not working so great at middle school right now because we don't have a lot of teacher turnover there. There's not this like underlying need. When you have new teachers that are hungry for materials, like they're going to visit this course constantly. Our middle school teachers are kind of embedded. They've been doing their things the way, you know, it's north and south. They've been doing their things for a while. To get them to collaborate to this level is going to be a little different. Algebra 1 is actually thriving. We have one teacher at Southern, Andrea Hines, and then Amanda Love at Northern. And they previously worked together, which helped facilitate that relationship because they worked at Southern together. So, but they're now both teaching Algebra 1. Every Algebra 1 teacher is accessing that course. there's a ton of materials posted there. And I know those folks will turn that over and edit that now in year 2. And they were kind of collaborating on their own anyway, because it was a highly tested area. So 40% of the teachers report they're ahead or with the shell course pacing. 50% report they're behind. I do want to point out that we never really asked for pacing data before. So this is something that, you know, it's good to know. And 50% of the K through 5 teachers reported completion of 5 or more topics in the the Envision program, and 50% were 5 topics or less. Okay. So now on to iReady, the diagnostic. So we picked up the diagnostic. All students K through 8 are taking the diagnostic. Every student K through 8 has a seat in the personalized instruction, which is commonly referred to as the MyPath. And then the tools for instruction are some of the RTI resources that our people can pull that are directly related to a student's diagnostic report. It's absolutely 100% the best data resource we've had for math. The diagnostic itself is adaptive at the beginning. So if I answer a question wrong, I go down. I answer a question right, I go up. And it just keeps doing that until it finds the level that I am at for each of the 4 domains that are tested. You get a scale score, you get information by domain. The system sets a typical and a stretch growth goal for each student, and then monitors those goals at each administration of the diagnostic. Provides next steps for teachers. They get a list of this student can do this student needs these for their next steps. And then those pieces go out to individual lesson plans that aren't necessarily online. They could be tabletop lessons, especially in the younger grades that we do a reteach with manipulatives. The personalized instruction is obviously what you've heard about. That's where the kids log on, they get the differentiation, they follow their own individual path, and that's based off their diagnostic results. And then the tools for instruction, again, are those additional resources that we have access to, and they're given to the RTI teachers, or the RTI teachers I see utilizing the most. I do see people using like the assessments that are in there as well, like other quizzes and little short cycle assessments that go beyond our core program. Yes.
When you talk about the personalized instruction, you said the kids log in.
Yes.
Which made me think, do the kids do much pencil and paper, or is it all mostly on their devices, or is it a combination?
Right, so it's a combination, because we don't want the kids just exclusively using the screen right now, because when you go to test at the end for MCAP, you're going to see a problem. You need to be able to complete it on paper, you return to them. So you'll see kids with whiteboards, like a lot of teachers have utilized whiteboards, and they've kept that utilization as we've exited the pandemic. So they'll do the problem on the whiteboard, and they'll answer. In the primary grade, there's a lot of movement on the screen, like they can actually physically move the pieces. So I don't see them writing as much, because it's more about moving the components in to solve the problem. We do, in some of the upper grades, they do still do things on paper, and I encourage them to do paper to screen, because again, that's how they're going to be assessed at the end of the year.
And this is supplemental to our core curriculum. So
Yeah,
we're getting
absolutely.
math curriculum.
Yeah, they're
that is
writing in their
also paper,
normal
pencil,
math
and
time. Yeah.
manipulatives.
Absolutely. So this is a lesson example, and again, this is one where the kids would move it on the screen. If they have a touch screen Chromebook, they would just pick the numbers up and move them into the locations. Most lessons average around 20 minutes. The older you get, so middle schoolers will start to see things that are 25, 30 minutes. But you don't have to complete it in one sitting. It knows exactly where you exit it, and then you go back in. And then each lesson, there is an accompanying quiz that you pass it, you move on. If you fail it, the teacher gets notified or gets that in your lesson MyPath, and then they know they got to complete at least touch base with you for a reteach. This is an example of that prescription like I was talking about earlier. So this is just a snapshot of someone's MyPath. And then the estimated time the lessons would be. Each of those is clickable. So if a teacher goes into a student's MyPath and they want to see the lesson they're going to be delivered to the student, they can click on that, and it'll take them to this screen where they can preview the practice items, they get to read about the standard, and they can actually take the quiz that the students would see, question for question. So if a student fails a quiz, you can go in and you can look at the quiz and you can kind of get a feel for the problems before you talk to that student. So then this leads me to the growth results from the second diagnostic that we're in the window right now. It'll close on February the 11th, which I guess is Friday. It's been open since January 10th. So is Mr. Gank? Mr. Gank? All right. You can click on that, right?
I hope.
All right. Yeah, we'll click on the elementary results by grade.
Okay, gotta make sure I can find my
And if you could hit the zoom button one time down at the bottom, the magnifying glass. Awesome. All right. So this is the comparison from the initial fall diagnostic versus the winter window for all elementary school students. You can see the overall students assessed. We're very close to 100% being assessed right now, so I feel really good about that, especially considering it's open till Friday. You get 5 colors right now, okay? The striped green is mid or above grade level. The green is early on grade level. The yellow is 1 grade level behind. Red, 2 or more. And the striped red is 3 or more. You also get the total number of students. It is a little small, but you get a total number of students for each of those categories, where it started, and then the total number of students where they are right now, as well as percentages. I'm very encouraged by the fact that in the fall, we had 34% of our students 2 or more grade levels below, right? And now that is down to 17%, which is very good. That's positive movement up off the bottom. And then the top has definitely grown, which you can see from the color. 6% when we took the early fall were mid or early on, and now that's up to 29%. If you scroll down just a tiny bit. So this comes by domain too. So the 4 domains that are measured on each assessment are number and operations, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and geometry. You'll see here for the elementary level, there were great gains in both measurement and data and geometry, which are lessons that we traditionally don't spend a lot of time on when we're in the core instruction, and especially when you think about the last 2 years. So when we're trying to accomplish number and operations in algebra and algebraic thinking every day over the last 2 years, there wasn't a ton of time spent on measurement and data, but just from first diagnostic to second, very positive gains. If you could scroll to grades K and 1. So again, major growth in grade K for mid and early on, and then the same thing for grade 1. Those, you went from 3% to 30% in grade 1, which is very good. If you keep going, point out a statistic here at the bottom. 2 or more grade levels below in the fall window was 40% for second graders. And now that's been cut down to 14. So that's 26, right? Point increase. That's huge, because keep in mind, as we look at this data, if we fill the gaps in K1, 2, 3, because once you pass 3, it just gets wider and wider. So these are the locations we really want to backfill and do our best job. If you look at grade 3, real quick, same thing on that bottom percentage. If you took the 2 or more and the 3 or more, you get 46%, and now it's down to 14. So that's tremendous growth at grade 3, and especially on the top side as well. 29% of those that are early or mid coming from 4%. So, and just, the change we talk about student numbers a lot, right? So the 46% of grade 3 students that were 2 or more levels below, now it's down to 14%. That means 71 students moved in a positive direction toward being just 1 grade level below, which, quite frankly, in a normal year, no one would have batted an eye about if a kid was, 6 or 10 months back, Okay, can we go to the next one? I'm not going to walk you through this one as much, but these are posted with this presentation. This one's the diagnostic growth, and it looks at it differently. It looks at like how many kids have met their goal already. If you want to zoom in and look just a tiny bit. And that's important because where kids came in and the software sets the growth goal. We don't have any control over that, right? So they've looked at it runs off an algorithm that looks at their national data for years and says, hey, this kid came in at here and they're on this grade level, this is where they should go. And we've had a lot of kids already meet the typical growth goal, which is really good. And that's what this report does by grade level. Now, little caveat to that. You know, if a student blew off the diagnostic when they took it, and I don't feel that K through 5 students do that frequently, but in middle school that might have happened a couple times, then they came in at a rating so low that they grew maybe 2 grade levels and their growth goal got inflated, right? So, and that's all a process of monitoring the data and moving forward and my office and teachers and principals learning how to like look for those signs when we're implementing in the future. So, and then the last report for elementary is the personalized instruction summary. And these are indicators that we pay attention to on a weekly basis. So that's the total number of hours on average that the elementary students have spent in the resource since the beginning of the year, okay? Now, what's important about that is, you know, the guidance is try to get the students 45 minutes per week, right? That could be, people are handling that all differently. You know, they're doing 30 minutes one day, 15 minutes another, 15, 15, 10, 10, 10, 10 until they get it. It's happening a whole lot of different ways. We've been in school 91 days, right? 18 weeks, right? It's a simple equation here. 13.2 hours is where we should be, and we're exceeding that right now. But it's also eye-opening from the fact that a lot of people say, well, they're on the computer too much. Well, we've been in school since September, and on average, kids only have 14 hours logged in there. That's not a ton of time in the you know, that's 2 school days. You know, in the grand scheme of things, if they were on there for the full school days. So I like where that number is right now.
They were on that much Saturday at home.
That is correct. And by the way, that's good that you bring that up. There is no home use of this right now unless they're on quarantine. We're not sending home the Chromebooks so they can spend time at home on this. This is an in-school resource right now. And then if you scroll down, there's just the times broken down by grade level. If someone looks at this report, K will stand out as having a lot less time because we gave guidance at the beginning of the year to drastically reduce the amount of time that kindergartners were on there because kindergartners were out in front of their instruction. They were seeing lessons that they had never been taught by the teacher yet. So we had a high early fail rate because, again, they were way up, where they came in their diagnostic put them out in front of any instruction they were seeing. So we just asked teachers to reduce the total amount of time, and now that's all kind of leveling out right now. But again, that's, you know, first time doing it, hard to see that go. All right, so the middle school stuff, just very quickly, I'm not gonna walk through these that much. Just point out a couple highlights in the first one here, the diagnostic results. So not as much overall growth, but definitely positive movement. So the top in the early fall was sitting at 16%. When you combine those 2 upper levels, it's now sitting at 29, which is very good growth for the top at the middle school level. And then the bottom went from a combined 48%, 2 or more grade levels below, to 36%. And more importantly, I like looking at the student numbers, which are in parentheses and the bolded there, but a little hard to see on the screen right now. Because we definitely did move students up off the 3 or more grade levels below line. It's about 50, it's a difference of 57 students. So 57 students are no longer 3 or more grade levels below is like the way I like to look at that, which is important. If we go to grade 6, again, very positive data in the 2 bottom levels. you know, as far as moving kids forward, but growth at each area. The top for 7th grade definitely grew, went from 13 to 29, so a 16 percentage point growth there. And then 8th grade definitely grew at the top. And I'd like to say that that's because our 8th graders were incentivized to do a little bit better the second time, right? So maybe some of those folks that blew it off slightly or didn't take it as seriously when they first returned to school, and those numbers definitely expanded. One thing I will point out though, and I hate to do this because it is the end of my presentation, is that at 8th grade, three grade levels or more below, that percentage did not move at all. And that speaks to what I said earlier about getting the gaps filled earlier in a student's career. Because once it gets to 8th grade, there is a list of things that we have to address. So a program like this, first of all, I think you see how data rich it is to help teachers identify what students are missing right now. And then you get those gaps filled in those earlier grades moving forward, they won't show up there in 8th grade with those. So, yes.
How can this information be used for tutors that, as far as the students that are falling behind?
Yeah.
Do they roll it back a couple of grades for teaching that again?
Well, if a student is 3 grade levels or more below, the prescription that they have, that's where it is. So those are the lessons that student's seeing. Those are also the RTI resources that are identified for that student at that level. So tutors can work with students on those materials. And again, they don't have to go search for it. It's lined up with their account. Yeah, and again, I'm very happy with the way all the data looks, but we do have to keep perspective on the fact that we're only 91 days into this resource. We see positive numbers right now, and every day I see people using it differently, which is good. You know, they're bought into it. They understand they got power in the data that they have at their hands right now. So, any other questions?
And the other strategies that Mr. Schultz highlighted also contribute.
Oh yeah,
to
absolutely.
The diagnostic numbers as well. It's just the personalized pathway is the intervention associated with this particular diagnostic, but it is a holistic diagnostic.
Everybody use that?
Yeah.
Very, very good.
Sorry, 3 questions. So
Yeah.
when do they test again, so we can do a comparison of what we have now, data you have now that will close this week? What's the next time?
So there is something called, because our implementation is going well, iReady has discussed what's called a growth check, which would be a short cycle assessment. I'm debating doing that at the end of March right now. That was not part of our initial rollout plan, but because they were doing well, they offered that as a chance. I'd like to do it at the end of March because I feel like that would be a good indicator before we get into the spring testing. If we don't do that, the last assessment I want it to follow the spring testing. I want it to be the last data point that we capture, so then we can hand off that data to the next teacher and it's fresh and they know how to use it. So, and it could also help us with any kind of summer programming we implement to get that last data point, especially on those students in the 2 or more grade levels below.
Second question would be, have we found anything that we could beg, borrow, or steal from somebody else as a parent resource, right, that might be helping their children at home? I use math every day. I will tell you, my son every once in a while brings some math that he's drawing boxes and trying to explain something, and I'm like, I can't help you with that. I'll tell you what the answer is, but I can't.
No, yeah.
I can't help you with that thought process.
I hear you. In this first year implementation of iReady, I'm on the fence about allowing home use beyond quarantine because there has to be a balance struck there with parent participation. Parent can't be answering for the student, right? But I do see the value in the lessons in iReady explaining the boxes and the pictures and all the diagrams and models that kids are expected to draw now to demonstrate. Yeah, we could post a couple of those per grade level and parent would know, hey, this is why the student's drawing this out this way. So, but again, that's in discussion for sharing some of those resources, maybe in year 2, after everybody firmly understands how to use iReady.
And then my third and final, would be, earlier tonight, we requested data at the school level, both for the state testing as well as the local testing. I think would be beneficial as we take a look at this and do to the program.
Yeah, that is definitely available. I can send that if,
Yeah, we'll send it through, Ms. Baker,
Yeah.
but yeah, we
Yeah,
have
we
plans
asked
to,
earlier if she would provide
Yeah,
us with that information.
I told
absolutely.
them it was a click of a button.
Yes, no, absolutely, yeah. Yeah. I like to look at grade level whole right now for the county perspective. I think it's important for teachers to see that too, so they can, and this will be shared with them. Principal PLC will go over some of this information on Thursday at the elementary level. And they'll be, everything I shared with you tonight will be shared with them and the survey results from the teachers. Because again, it is very hard when you teach, you are the only person teaching a grade level in your building. You have no greater perspective on what's going on around you, and this data now tells you what's going on around you. So, you know, just so you can have a perspective, you know. So. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for all the information.
Excellent presentation. Okay, we're gonna move on to, policies and procedures. Yeah, I should announce that. There was no public comment. No one signed up. K-1 school visitation policy procedure, revision.
I think, yep, there he is.
There he is.
I think Mr. Warnick should be right on cue, Mr. Warren. So you all know our, manager of safety and security. This is Mr. Clark Warnick. I believe this is your first, attempt at a policy and procedure in this role, correct?
This is my first time,
All right,
yes.
so
Yes.
we'll
So I'm here
give him
to,
a little latitude. This is his first one. And this is the first read for both, so, we will not be taking action on these this evening, but, we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Warnick, to, talk about the policy, which the board will vote on next month, and then this is the, procedure that goes along with it.
okay. Again, I'm here to talk about the, Garrett County Public Schools Visitation Policy and Procedures K-1. This is the first read, and it's been, through the policy committee. The procedures have been revised, but the policy itself is new. The procedures were initially adopted in 1975 and last revised in 1988. Many things have changed since then in how we keep our schools safe and secure, and at the same time providing a welcoming environment. We have also implemented a new visitor management system, and we want our written policies and procedures to align with how we are now actually conducting visitor screening and sign-in. So it'd be my pleasure to answer any questions you may have this evening.
Questions about, policy or procedure, that, we're looking at for the first time tonight, or anything about the Raptor system? Anybody, any questions you might have about anything that we're doing? This is our first read. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions the next time you come.
Okay.
It will be adopted.
When you look at procedure,
Okay.
under C, definitions,
Yes.
in the last sentence, it says visitors may include, but are not limited to parents, community members, that goes on. A lot of things that are sent home says parents/guardians. Should we add guardians in there? You know what I mean, like a lot of documents are sent home to be signed or not?
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Under definitions, C, visitor.
I see it.
That's something that we kind of, any documentation says parent or guardian. And then I do have a question. Under the same thing, C, administrative procedures, 3, staff may require identification. Do you mean like a photo, a driver's license, like something? with a name on
Any
it?
type of state identification, driver's license, a regular ID card, passport.
So it has to have a photo on it then?
Well,
Or not necessarily?
they would ask for that.
Okay.
But with the visitor management system, we don't necessarily need to have a ID card.
Okay.
The full name and date of birth can be added in manually to do the screening and sign-in.
Okay.
Any others? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll sort of take action next month.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Warren.
Okay, now we move on to, JBA, prevention of bullying, harassment, intimidation, policy procedure. This is an action item tonight, so, Ms. Baker, do you have a recommendation on the new policy procedure?
Yeah, I do. I recommend that we, accept the policy that Mr. Hummel will outline. He will explain why this is for action this evening, but I would recommend to the board that we, approve, policy JBA, this evening.
Okay. Superintendent's recommending that we do approve policy JBA. Is there a motion as such, so we can have discussion? So moved by Rodney, seconded by Jason. Go ahead and make the presentation, Mr. Hummel, and we'll just, interject if we have questions.
All right, thank you. Good evening. Back in December, a little over a month ago, the state Board of Education adopted some changes to this policy and has asked every county to update their local policy to meet the standards that the state has adopted. They gave us until February 15th to make these changes. So we have met as the policy committee looking at it, trying to align everything to our policy and procedure format and everything. The previous one was in a different format, so we had to make changes with that, but also keeping the intent of what the state has guided us and directed us to include in our new policy and procedure. There's a lot with definitions and just starting next school year, there's a new investigation form, new reporting form that will be used that aligns with this, but some of the definitions have changed. An example would be instead of the victim is now the targeted student as one example. So through the policy committee and all of us working together, I think we've aligned what the state has asked us to do with this new policy. So
I know the policy committee vetted it.
No, we've looked at this before, and made some suggestions, and
Like-
we've almost been real good about that.
yeah, and we have to send this across to the state by February 15th, so well, I know they'll be reviewing it as well.
I think the only thing that came up in discussion, I think Monica was had the same question about the time frame of talking about alleged victims.
Yeah, well, I think we all did, but that's what the model policy of the state said. So I think we added in there. And I think our practice of what we've done is we usually notify almost all the time within 24-hour periods. So, I can,
Strange, if you would.
yeah, it's 2 different time frames, yes.
You know, we added the as soon as possible language, yeah. I think the reason probably is some of the jurisdictions in the state of Maryland, might have difficulty finding and contacting the guardian, and so it might take more than 24 hours. So they had that little bit longer time span there, but I think our candidates to have notifications done immediately.
Yes, and that's been our past practice. And our old policy actually said, just communicate. It didn't even have a time frame. So now follow the old state policy too, so.
It might be hard to find some parents or guardians even in this county within some place.
Any other questions?
If it's possible.
Yes.
I do, just for clarification, I mean, I've read over them, both policy procedures. It says, section is students. So is this a report that Board of Ed employees or students can, fill out, or is it just students filling out? Like,
The reporting form,
yes.
any individual.
So even though it says students, they can be, but, okay. So you said any individual. So, but the,
So I can follow along.
well, like, I'm just looking at procedures,
Oh.
section J, students, just for clarification.
Yeah.
So does that mean this is only, bullying, harassment, or intimidation that is on students, correct? Or students, not toward Board of Ed employees? Do you know what I mean? Like, say, I think I have you confused, don't I?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that
I'm
this
not
is,
following.
well, it says section.
I think if it's towards another staff person, I think there's a different policy.
That's what I thought. I wanted to make sure.
For that, it goes under personnel.
Yes, okay.
That would be the section with, now I'm following,
So-
personnel, this is students, that if a student is being bullied, harassed, or
Yeah.
intimidated, this is where the
Okay.
parent, community member, teacher, administrator, anybody
Yes.
can fill it out.
Okay, so it's only on
Correct.
bullying, harassment, or intimidation toward a student. That was what I thought. I wanted to make sure.
Correct.
Do we have more of an issue of this, could you say at elementary, middle, or high school level? Is there one grade level that might stand out more, or not necessarily?
In my position now and previous positions, our forms are very rarely used, and I won't say that we don't have problems with it. It just, a lot of people don't take it, and it's just handled within our internal processes and everything else. So, I'd hate to even say, I mean, we have data that's collected and put into Power School, but, I mean, it's what the students report and what we hear and investigate.
You don't have to have a report filled out to investigate bullying.
Yeah.
I mean, if administration's aware of it, the teacher's aware of it, you can take action.
Correct.
Without a form being.
That's why I asked that more, because when you look at your definitions of all of them, see definitions, when you look at cyberbullying, I think maybe more, like it happened maybe in high school level, not necessarily, but when you look at digital devices like cell phones, and it goes on.
I would say probably 5 years ago, that may be accurate, but it's amazing how many youngsters have cell phones at a younger age now. And the understanding of how to use them, and what can actually be done with them. So, but those definitions are exactly, once again, following the language that the state gave us, so.
So again, to say what Mr. Woods had said, under procedures providing notice of an act of bullying, harassment, or intimidation, which goes under R2, which you had commented already, our concern was 3 days for the alleged targeted student must be notified of the parent or guardian of them. See, that's where that guardian comes in. I knew parent or guardian is tied together. And then the 2 is the parent or guardian of the alleged perpetrator must be notified. It says 5 days, which is concerning, but we do have in there, which I'm glad you put in there, as soon as possible. So that doesn't, you could be notified directly that day or the day after then. Doesn't mean that it's going to be waited until 3 or 5 days till you're contacted.
Yes, we try to act on any report of this as soon as possible, usually within that day. If not, depending when the report comes in, immediately we take it seriously. So, but the state's saying that we need to respond within that time frame.
Well, that's my main concern, that as soon as possible, that we don't wait until 4 or 5 days. But Mr. Gladstone made a valuable point. Sometimes you can't get a hold of a parent or guardian, and then it might be a little bit longer till you are in contact with the person.
Any other questions, anyone? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to accept the JBA policy. Those in favor of accepting JBA policy as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. And it is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Policy and accompanying procedures now in effect.
One more thing, I have a little note down here.
Sure.
I guess you got some input from the principals on this too, because they would be the ones, in their school that would,
Actually, we tried to align with what the state guidance and what they're setting forth is what we have to follow.
Right.
So once we were approved, then like I said, we gotta send it over to the state. I'm sure they'll be reviewing every county to make sure we're aligning with what the intent of it was. And then, like I said, the forms, the reporting forms and the investigation forms do not get rolled out until next school year. So they've been very explicit to say, please do not mix up these forms and that kind of stuff. So we'll continue. The process really isn't changing a whole lot of what we're doing, but the forms and some definitions will be changing moving forward.
So I guess the principals were aware that this was going to be an action item tonight.
Correct.
Because we normally get it the month before, tape, but stop review for a month, and then it's an action. But it's all coming tonight. I just want to make sure the principals were aware of this. That's all.
Well, I just want to point to the principals, we discussed this in policy committee, and the principals are the ones that are responsible for implementing the timelines and justification.
Yeah, like I said, it's gonna probably be a two-prong that will update the policy, get it out to the principals, but then also saying at the beginning of next school year, even on our website, we'll have to update the new forms and roll it out so the parents and everybody's doing something like have the updated forms.
It'll be in the student handbook then too. Whatever changes, that would be in there as well.
Correct.
Thank you.
I got another one.
you're
not going anywhere yet.
He has early entrance.
This is the first read, and really this change is coming based on some definition, actually some verbiage just with changing of positions. Also, some of the assessments that we use for students to identify early entrance into kindergarten and first grade, the assessments we needed to change, and also, once again, the format, because it was outdated with the format since.
Okay, the first read, are there any questions, Mr. Hummel?
I didn't even realize that we did this. Do we have many that are actually, an early entrance to?
There's a lot of phone
pre-K
calls.
K1?
This is the first year that I have experienced in working with Mrs. Ashby, but Ms. Baker has told me stories of knowing when this date came and having this policy sitting right next to be able to answer
When I was
questions.
elementary and early childhood, I kept this at my desk, starting about April. We do get a number of inquiries. We don't have a lot of students that are early entry, but we do get a lot of inquiries about it.
Basically, it's a 4 months. If they, like, say what, pre-K, there would be 4 by September 1st, right? Kindergarten, I should say kindergarten 5 by September 1st.
Right.
Because many years ago, you didn't have to be for kindergarten 5 by December 30th.
Right.
Then you kept backing every year. So this is kind of how it was years ago, one time. It wasn't, you could have been that age, back that early.
I guess you could.
In a way, it was for kindergarten.
Yeah, because they gradually back the date back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now it is, you have to be.
Right.
Yeah.
But really, our procedure is staying the same. It's just the assessments and
More of a format.
Director of Student Services, Chief Academic Officer, some of the formalities. So.
You guys look at this with two, Matthew.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's important to note that in pre-K, it has to be a NEET, and in kindergarten, it's an accelerated student. So they're very different in what student qualifies for an early entrance to pre-kindergarten or kindergarten or first grade.
Yes, it has them on there. Like for pre-kindergarten, I was highlighting different things. And then it had on there for pre-K, if the enrollment is at or approaching capacity, 18 or more students per class, the child would be denied early admission to pre-kindergarten, but referred to, and then it gives different places you could be referred to still get them in for schooling. Like when you look at it, I do have a question. Under procedures, C, administrative procedures, and you go, we're still on pre-kindergarten. Number 3, if early admission to pre-kindergarten is still requested following the meeting and income eligibility has been established, a date will be scheduled to begin the testing process. The Learning Accomplishment Profile, LAP, will be administered. Who does that? Is that like, that we do that in the school system?
Yeah, our school psychs administer all the assessments.
Okay.
And as it states in the policy and procedure, then based on the assessments and everything, the team of individuals, including the parents and those requesting possible early entrance, then look at all the information and make the best decision possible for that student.
It does look like most of the red that you put on here is just for tests.
Correct. Yeah, and like I said, then putting it in the right format too for new.
Okay, we will take this one.
All right, now I'll leave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Schweitzer, give us a revenue projection.
I'm back this evening to provide the presentation on the draft state aid numbers. And this is a very different presentation than I've given the last 7 times. So bear with me, there have been a lot of changes as a result of the blueprint legislation. So The variables that go into our revenue have largely stayed the same. They're based upon our student enrollment and then the wealth of Garrett County when you compare it to the other 23 counties in the city of Baltimore. So the changes year over year, it's no surprise to the board that we have had a high decline in our enrollment. We are the highest rate of enrollment decline this year over year. We had a decline in all of our programs, foundation program, the comp ed, special education, English learners, and also our supplemental pre-K. When you review our local wealth per pupil, it is experiencing one of the highest increases in the state. And so we have this converging, very, very bad math problem, basically, is what is happening. So Garrett has the third highest percentage increase in the property wealth per pupil, which is what is driving Garrett County's wealth. The wealth calculation is driven over 79% by the property and then the 20% by our income. So while we're 16th in the state with income, you know, we're ranked 4th with property. So that's where we're seeing an unfavorable split, if you will. So the state participation in the education effort is lower than what the county is expected to contribute. So what that means for this coming year is that Garrett County will experience the largest percentage decline in education effort across all 24 local education associations for FY23. Oh, sorry. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about blueprints. I think we've had a presentation almost every board meeting since October. It's something about blueprint. And so here's a little bit of a high view, if you will. There are a couple pieces of funding that expired through legislation. They were part of Little Kerwin, and that's the mental health coordinator, the teacher salary incentive, and the students with disability grants. That attributed to about $522,000 worth of revenue that is not continuing. There were some funding sources that were replaced. So the net taxable income adjustment is now called the Guaranteed Tax Base Program. The supplemental grant is now called the Blueprint for Maryland Future Transition Grant. Unfortunately, both pieces of those funding are what they're calling stopgap and will eventually become prorated and go away by FY29 or 30. Garrett County doesn't qualify for the net taxable income adjustment or the guaranteed tax base program, whereas previously we did qualify for the net taxable income adjustment. So that's about $485,000 that we won't be receiving. Then there are these special pieces that I've called governor-funded sources. And so basically, if the governor places a piece of funding in his budget and it makes it all the way through the legislative session, it kind of sticks. So last year, he placed declining enrollment hold harmless pieces of funding, and that was about $1.6 million that Garrett County received for the declining enrollment hold harmless and the transportation hold harmless. However, in FY23, he did place a hold harmless for comp ed, which Garrett County did receive, and it was a favorable piece of legislation for us. Now, again, it has to get through the whole legislative process, and as part of that, it could go away.
What is there amount? Yeah.
It's, I have it later on in the
I thought it
presentation.
was all later on too. Sorry about that.
It's 90,580.
Talking about the third office.
Okay, so, this year, we're having some changes to what is called the major state aid programs. And this is outlined in legislation. And, there were some pieces that we had, viewed as restricted. We treated them as restricted, just as we would any other grant or award. And going forward, we're receiving information almost daily. And we had another CFO meeting today. We did receive some information that the supplemental instruction tutoring grant, which is on the very bottom, that's the last line, that will now become part of the major state aid programs and be what we call as unrestricted. So that was an adjustment we learned about today, this afternoon. So just to summarize the major state aid programs, we are enjoying a very large increase to the foundation program, and that's driven by the per pupil amount. It increased about $1,000 per student is what, and that was really part of the blueprint to envelop some of these other pieces of funding that went away. The mental health coordinator is supposed to be rolled up in this foundation. The comp ed, we already talked about the hold harmless there. That was $90,580 that we wouldn't have received. So that's why the number is exactly the same as last year. The social education formula is also increased due to the per pupil. It's 86% of the foundation amount. The transportation, the reasons for that increase is due to the inflationary index of 8%. You'll see the net taxable, the NTI adjustment is at 0 for the next year. The hold harmless is at 0. Our students with disabilities grant is at 0. We do see an increase in our pre-K numbers, and that's because of the per pupil amount. It increased significantly. We have a new piece of funding for post-CCR CTE pathways. The teacher salary incentive grant, that is going away, so you see a 0 there. But we do have what they're calling teacher salary, and that's for the National Board Certified Teacher group. And then, of course, the hold harmless is at 0. And a health coordinator, we do not receive any concentration of poverty funds, as we do not have any concentration of poverty schools at this time. The transitional supplemental instruction grant, that is increased because of the large amount of the per pupil increase year over year. Unfortunately, though, when you look at all of the state aid programs, we are looking at about a 1% decrease, or $225,000. Yes, Mrs. Drinker.
Did you just say that we possibly will be getting some money in the supplemental instruction tutoring piece, or no?
It's there. It's $177,555.
Oh, okay.
Transitional supplemental
Okay,
instruction.
all right, thank you.
But that will become part of the unrestricted. So, so when we provide your budget book for you, this amount will move to the unrestricted portion from the restricted.
Okay.
So for the local appropriation, it also has some legislative changes tied to the blueprint. So there's now a two-pronged test of what the local appropriation must be. And it's the greater of the maintenance of effort, or what is now called the local share. So the maintenance of effort calculation is basically the same that it has always been. However, there's a smoothing effect with with enrollment, both declining or increasing. We do not have at this time information on the escalator or the educational effort, if our county qualifies for that, but we are estimating that maintenance of effort is down about $788,000 or 2.8%. So then there's this new part of legislation called the local share, and so each state aid program provides an overall per pupil amount, and then based upon the county's wealth, it's split on what portion the state funds of that, and then what portion the county is responsible for. And so when they provide the local share for all of the state aid programs and add it up, they get a total, and our total right now is $26,147,965. That is less than the calculation, the formula for maintenance of effort. So at this time, it is our belief that the maintenance of effort amount will be what prevails, that local government is responsible for. So here is the maintenance of effort analysis that we provide each year. And the total eligible enrollment has a little asterisk there because that's where you're not going to be able to tie that to any of the enrollment charts that we've provided in the past, because the prior year is the greater of either your 2019, September 2019 enrollment, or a 3-year average of 2017, 18, and 19. So ours is an average, that's what the greater is. So that's why you see that 3,645.67 students. And then for FY23 number, it's the same, only a little different. So it's the greater of your 2021 enrollment or a 3-year average 2018, 2019, and 2021. So they're excluding 2020, which is favorable for Garrett County. So when you look at a year-over-year variance here, we're only showing 100 students down. And that's because we're basically comparing 2 3-year averages to each other and taking out the 2020 enrollment.
Is that a one-time deal?
No, this is for FY23 only. That's what the legislation is written for FY23 only. Okay, so here is what, we talked a little bit about that local share, state share language for the 2-pronged test. And so this is the information that the state provided us, and it has the state share in the first column, and then what the locals are required to fund for each state aid program, and then we have a total. It's important to understand that we have a new way of thinking about these programs because they're unrestricted as to use, but they're restricted to report. So currently, we're unpacking all of the legislation and all of the allowable costs for all of these programs. And we're receiving more information every day about it, but we're directed to use this funding for only qualifying expenses for qualifying students. So the enrollment numbers that are driving those costs, those dollars should be spent on those students at those schools. It's basically limiting local autonomy to spend our unrestricted funds where the board or the superintendent or the leadership deems our own priorities.
Now it's written into the blueprint.
Yes, and it's now law. It's in the education chapter.
And then don't you have to file documentation of it, or forms, or papers, or something to follow where the money is?
Yes, yes, and I'll get to that in just a minute. So here's the big picture. At this time, this is what we are understanding our unrestricted funding is going to look like. The very bottom line, we are looking at being about $1 million down, which is 1.9%. One piece that is a bit of a caveat is the estimated prior year balance, or the fund balance that we've used previously. We will have to conduct further analysis to really see if we can use fund balance. Right now, we are below we're below the amount that we should have. We should have 45 to 60 days of unrestricted operating cash. And unfortunately, at this past year end, we were a little bit low. So where we stand right now, we would not be able to use fund balance to plug any type of deficit. However, we will be doing some analysis at the end of the third quarter to see where we estimate the fund balance to be, so that we can possibly use it for some budgeting purposes.
So you're saying that number could possibly be up then after the third quarter? You'll get the information to us on the estimated prior year balance, fund balance?
If we have fund balance that we can use, yes. Okay, so this is what I was speaking about before. So the funding must follow the student. And this is a new requirement that 75% of the program funding for certain programs outlined in the legislation must be, a minimum must be spent at the school with which the student attends. So we did get updated guidance today that, so that makes this slide wrong, but the reporting requirement is for the year ending 2024. So we have an extra year than what we thought, but the budgeting requirement is also back 1 year. So it's fiscal year 2025. I want to assure the board, though, that here at the central office, the cabinet has been unpacking this and reviewing, scraping our budgets, and really scrubbing how we're spending our unrestricted dollars, what qualifies for which piece of funding. We have had more budget meetings than I think I've ever had in all the 7 years that I've been doing this, to be able to analyze how we're doing it, what we're doing already qualifies within the letter of the law. So, so this is nice that we have an extra year for that.
Well, we're not alone in these financial problems. I'll tell you, everybody, most jurisdictions are, from what I heard. And so I think you're getting a lot of good feedback from the CFOs in the other counties on how to deal with this. Right?
Yes, yes, and we're having emergency meetings just about every day. We're collaborating in some manner, and we're trying to check each other's work, you know, because we're all interpreting the language in this legislation.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we don't always have other people within our offices that understand it and can check what you're doing. So it is nice. We've really been able to collaborate across the state.
The accountability board moves some of the deadlines forward or back. does that impact the budget? I mean, so some of the salary, deadlines, those type things, if they get moved, does that affect this budget?
I don't believe this budget is gonna be affected by anything. It's my understanding that they will be presenting, a package, a legislative package of what deadlines may move. Even if they presented something for the 7/1/2022 requirements, I don't believe that they would go through.
The deadline specific to salary and the career ladder have not been discussed in the situations that I've been in. And I watched the AIB meeting the other day and have been in more blueprint meetings in the last than the whole first half of the year with the state, at the state level. And where the shifting of timelines, I think, is more likely to occur will be with some of the programmatic pieces and with the overall implementation plan. That those are the two discussion pieces that we're having. I have not heard anything specific to anyone entertaining pushing back career ladder pieces yet. I mean, it's not to say it won't happen, but I haven't been privy to that at this time.
Or reporting. And we received a chart today about like all the pieces that will require reporting. And so it will change the way here we even monitor throughout the budget year. You know, we talk about the budget cycle. We showed you that big circle last month, and you know, we're monitoring the current budget we're in right now while we're building next year's budget, but we're still reporting on last year's expenditures. So we're like in 3 different years all the time. They're talking about, we may have to report to the state mid-year on our unrestricted expenditures. We've never had to do that before. You know, we report on our restricted expenditures every month, but you know, that builds in a whole nother level of complexity. It also requires a different level of monitoring. You know, so these are all things that we're still seeking clarification on. We're still learning about. So.
What is the definition of the post-CCR/CCE pathways?
That is a student that has achieved ELA and math readiness.
Correct. Proficiency. Yes, they have to qualify for both. So for us, that would be in the spring, that's a 3 or 4 on the MCAP assessment for English 10, and that's for what we qualify for, or another math assessment in high school. And that I would be remiss if I didn't say that's the definition now. The state is evaluating that.
Change it, you mean, the name?
They're looking at to see if they can expand it to more than one assessment, so that there would be multiple ways of achieving the CCR standard.
So the last item here is the non-recurring cost exclusion, and this is a piece that has not been changed through Blueprint. It allows for local governments to fund their school systems above and beyond maintenance of effort for qualifying one-time expenses. There's a list there: computer labs, new technology, capital items. It is up to the discretion of MSDE to approve it, whether or not they agree with the true one-time nature of the purchase. And because of a timing, you know, you don't know, you submit it by March, you hear by May. You know, if it's something that you have to have, you're kind of at their mercy. So so that's another option.
State Switzer, do you have anything that you would suggest that we, request in this area?
Well, it'll actually, we'll be working on that, as Allison said, the continued meetings and bring a formal list to you.
I guess we have to have it at our next board meeting if it must be submitted by March 31st, correct?
And if you recall, there are two.
Right, we have 2 meetings in March, so.
22nd.
Right, yeah. We'll make sure we have the request to you and plenty of time to meet that deadline.
Other questions that, anyone may have about projections? Moving forward. Anything, anyone? Yeah, I see what I'm gonna do is take a 5-minute recess, or to stretch, stand up for the next presentation may take a few minutes to go through. So, we've been out here for 12.5 hours, so let's say 20 after, we get 7 minutes.
I didn't know you were gonna do that, I would have waited until. But I appreciate it.
I feel for that.
Alexis, are you having fun yet? Of course. You'll learn a lot.
Yeah.
Sure. A little bit, so we're
Going in when you're not there.
Okay, welcome back to our February meeting, which is a short recess. We have one final item for tonight. It's the facility utilization and grade band alignment. So let's do that presentation.
All right, so I'll be starting this presentation this evening, and there'll be certain slides that I'll be turning over to my Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Nicole Miller, and parts that we'll be turning over to Ms. Allison Schweitzer, the Director of Finance, who you just heard from regarding the revenue projections. So if you go to the second slide, we want the public and the board members, and you'll see my team here this evening. We've defined this really, and we know it's kind of an overused term, but it really is a perfect storm. We looked it up, and the definition in the Oxford Dictionary is a particularly bad or critical state of affairs arising from a number of negative or unpredictable factors. And we have a number of unpredictable factors that Mrs. Schweitzer just outlined with the revenue projections of things that we're not sure of in the next coming years. But we also have several things that are impacting Garrett County in the negative. And these 4 things are converging to make what we're calling this perfect storm. And you can see them, the blueprint for Maryland's future, our declining enrollment, our revenue and budget projections, and the state capital program. And we will go through each one of those as we go through this presentation. One thing I do want to say is we talked about it last month. It wasn't highly publicized last month, but one of the slides that will come up next was this discussion of our facility. If you remember, I put forth a number of budget priorities and then discussed that this particular slide would be one of our most difficult over the next 3 to 5 years. Because we must start addressing our facility utilization or our underutilization of our facilities. This runs really through all 12 schools to different degrees, and if not now, certainly in the next coming years, will begin to impact us more negatively each year. One thing that we have done is we really want to move through this in a systematic way. We understand that the board wants to have certain benchmarks and certain things happen, feedback from stakeholders, public meetings that we must have. But we also, what I've tasked my team with doing is to look at some of the things that happened in the past that also had a negative impact on Garrett County Public Schools, one being the initial overcrowding of Broadford, for instance. And we really want to make sure that we learn from some of those things and don't repeat those things. So we have really looked at this, and you'll see historically in the next couple of slides. But when we look at the enrollment projections and some of the things that we're going to talk about this evening, we really are preparing for the worst, but hoping, obviously, for the best. And so in some of the things that we projected this evening, you know, we are looking at some of worst case scenario, but, you know, I think it has come to a point where we probably are going to have to, as a board, make some of those very difficult decisions because we are fast approaching some of these very difficult times for our school system. So on the next slide, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, these are links in this presentation. This is historical background going all the way back to the RISE Strategic Plan of 2018. All of these are available on our website to people that can review them at their leisure. If you remember, in a meeting that we had with the county commissioners in 2016 and 17, they asked for a strategic plan. We began to put together the RISE strategic plan. It is still available. A number of the things that are recommended came out of that early work. Then you'll remember that that work kind of led into the Strategic Facilities Committee work that was facilitated by Dr. Lever the following year in 2019. His reports are also available on our website. And then in 2020, this board approved a 5-year strategic facilities plan that we are currently in the midst of implementing parts of that plan. You go to the next one. Oh, yes.
You said that these are on our website. Like, are they all in a certain area on the website? Are they all together, or do you have to look back if somebody wants to look at them?
Well, we are in the midst of migrating to a new one, so I'm going to ask Mark, do you know if they're all located in one location, and if not, can we do that?
We can get them together.
Okay.
I don't know the answer right off, but we can get them together.
Okay.
Right now, they're under the public information page. So if you go to
But we can make sure, yeah, we'll go through and make sure anything that we reference tonight that we will put all together.
Okay, thank you. So be user friendly.
And this presentation is public as well, so people can just go on there and click on each one. Right.
I'll take you right to the.
It'll take you right to that, right.
Yeah, we
So either way, yeah. Any other questions before I go on? Okay. So then, if we continue with the historical background, if you notice, each one of these headlines tied back to the perfect storm slide near the very beginning. The blueprint for Maryland's future, the legislation and now law, the roadmap that has been put into place. And we had some very good questions during Mrs. Schweitzer's presentation about the revenue and the timeline. It is our belief that even with some adjusted timelines, the blueprint combined with these other three factors make this a little bit more of an urgent need now than it has been in the past. So even if some of those timelines are changed, we feel that this is still the time that we're going to have to make these very difficult decisions, because 2025 will be here before we know it, and that's when sort of everything comes together. People can go on. The next part was the declining enrollment that we actually have a slide upcoming. There's been a major change in the state capital program with the IAC, the Interagency on School Construction. The format is different. The procedures are different. It used to be if you had a project that you wanted to get approved, we had to have a letter from the commissioners expressing support. We would go down and put forth our reasoning for that project, and typically they were approved. That is not the process anymore, and it is they are looking much more detailed into each project and how it fits in with the entire school system. And I think Mrs. Schweitzer explained that last month, if you remember, when she talked about schools that were in close proximity to one another. That was sort of what we were talking about with some of those changes with the state capital program. And then we intentionally made sure that this Presentation followed Mrs. Schweitzer's budget presentation this evening on the revenue, the projections that you just heard, and then certainly you can find last month's presentation on our priorities moving forward. Before I turn it over to our Blueprint coordinator, who is also Dr. Miller, our Chief Academic Officer, I do want to just say that, you know, in these recommendations this evening, there will become a lot of talk about these right now. None of this is set in stone, and I think we have talked as a board that the board would like to make sure that each thing is considered before they're asked to vote. And I think my team has really put together a plan that allows for that to happen. But we are at a point where we will have some very definitive changes to our instructional programs at each school if we don't examine the footprint and make some serious changes. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Miller, to talk about the next slide, which is the overview of the blueprint.
Sure, and this is a very condensed version of an overview of the blueprint. If you recall, as Ms. Baker just indicated, in the fall, we did a more comprehensive overview. But it is one of the major factors, one of the four, that is putting us in this position to consider these recommendations tonight. And you've heard a lot about it, but I just want to reiterate that it is law, it is legislation. Blueprint for Maryland's Future is a very substantial piece of legislation that is going to take us about, right now the estimate is 10 years to implement fully. And it is designed to really transform the instructional experience and the instructional program for students to really move Maryland school systems forward to be among the best in the nation as well as the world. So that's the whole point of the blueprint legislation. But I'd be remiss if I didn't just highlight that piece of information. There are several programmatic requirements, and again, this is a very 30,000-foot view of some major components that we know we're going to be facing. One of them is specific to the college and career readiness pillar, which is looking at transforming the instructional programs to ensure that all of our students are college and career ready with the goal at the end of 10th grade. And if not by the end of 10th grade, by the end of their career in high school. Part of implementing that, and again, these are just some of the components, we will be required to have an accelerated pathway for our students starting in middle school. That is going to be a significant programmatic change that we are going to have to navigate. We will have to have a remedial support and a supplemental programming process as well for any student who is either projected to not be on track to meeting CCR by 10th grade, or who has not met CCR. And if you are a 10th grader who has not met CCR in the future, an individualized plan will be required to be implemented to address that and to get that student back on track. It also requires post-college and career ready pathways at no cost to the student. So we will be expected to have a pathway specific to advanced placement. So looking at our current program and expanding upon that. Dual enrollment will have a whole new meaning. We have a very strong dual enrollment program, but what the blueprint is requiring is for students to be able to have the opportunity to earn at least 60 credits or an associate's degree. So there's going to have to be substantial work. And again, that's at no cost to the student. And also, the last CCR pathway is rigorous CTE programs, career and technical education programs. And those are designed, the way the legislation is written, to lead to industry certification so that students are able to compete in their field upon graduation. There's also an early childhood component that looks at expanding 3- and 4-year-old programs for pre-kindergarten or preschool age children. And while we have a very strong 4-year-old program, and it's very universal, it's full day, I fully believe it will meet the requirements stipulated in the law, we are going to have to address expanding opportunities for our 3-year-olds in our county. And then the final instructional pillar that we'll talk about on this slide is the pillar that really addresses resources to ensure all students are successful. And this is going to really require us to evaluate and navigate specific services for students. So when you think about this, this pillar, you're looking at struggling learners, students in kindergarten through 3rd grade who are not on grade level for reading, special education, student services, behavioral support, mental health support, English language learners, and of course concentration of poverty. So there are a number of student groups and specific services that we will have to implement to ensure that all of our students receive an equitable opportunity to be successful.
Can you explain more your second one, remedial support and supplement programming with individualized plan if CCR is not met by 10th grade? Do they have to meet it by 9th grade?
No, they can meet it if they're accelerated before 10th grade, but the goal is that they will meet it at the end of 10th grade. If they do not, then we will have to have either course offerings or programmatic offerings at the high school level to address catching them up, getting them on track to meet the CCR standard.
Does that mean they've maybe failed a class or they haven't taken a class? Like, go more into what's this?
So it's not necessarily about, I mean, they obviously have to pass classes to earn credit to graduate. But it's more about, are they performing at the college and career readiness definition? So in order to be college and career ready, based on the current definition, you have to be able to score proficient or higher on the ELA or math assessment at the high school level. So that would equate to English 10 or Algebra 1. If they are not on track to perform at that level, then we would have to put in supplemental programs to help support them. Or if, for example, they get to English 10 or Algebra 1 and they fail that assessment at the end, they may pass the class, they may not. We will be required to implement the remedial support necessary to get them back on track.
Okay, thank you.
Another pillar of the blueprint requirements that we have to address as a school system is the teacher leader pillar. And this pillar looks at elevating teachers and leaders. It's really designed to raise the standard and the status of teaching, including a performance-based career ladder and salaries comparable to other fields with similar educational requirements. It's also really looking at elevating the capacity of our teachers as we go through that process. So the things on this slide certainly do not encompass everything that has to deal with the teacher leader pillar, but they are important mandates that the board and the public need to be aware of that we will be required to implement. The first is for national board certification. There will be a mandatory salary increase of $10,000 for any teacher who is nationally board certified, and that starts fiscal 23, which will be this coming July. And if that individual is teaching at a identified low performing school, it would be an additional $7,000. So that is compounding. So it would be a total of $17,000 added to one's salary if they are nationally board certified and teaching at a low performing school. So that's a significant mandate, of course, and we anticipate that more and more teachers will be gaining their national board certification in order to take advantage of this increase in salary. We also have a mandate to have a 10% raise applied to teachers, and that was to occur between school year 2019 through the end of 23, which would be the start of fiscal 24. Yeah. So that is another fiscal implication that is going to be required. We are required to have mandated career ladders implemented by July 1 of 2024. That includes a variety of roles and levels, including lead teachers, distinguished professors, professor teachers, as well as distinguished principal. And when you look at those categories, just in and of itself, the blueprint mandates anywhere between a $5,000 to $15,000, depending on the category, increase to the salary. And then finally, we are required to have a starting salary for teachers of $60,000 minimum beginning July 1, 2026. So those are things that we've been modeling and that we've been in great discussion over and seeking clarification and guidance. But we know that at this time, these are components that we're going to have to plan for.
So, and the next component of the perfect storm is our declining enrollment coupled with the revenue. So we shared in October, and again, this is a live link in the presentation that will take you to that October board meeting presentation. And you can see that from 2010 to 2021, Garrett County Public Schools had a decline of over 736 students, which is about 18%. And then just in the past 5 years, we have had an 8% decline. That's over 290 students. And to put that into perspective, that's about the size of Yacht Glade. So over the course of 5 years, we've lost about the size of our Yacht Glade Elementary School if all the students had been in one place. We know they're not.
Well, the pandemic contributed to that, loss of students.
I think that we went over the reasons in that October presentation, and
it's not all of it. It's a little.
not all of it. We had when you look at the 2-year. So that's what this one was looking at. So we had a follow-up in November, and Mr. Hummel presented that presentation. But when you look at the 2-year, the reasons in 2019 or the 2020 were driven by parent home instruction. The reasons in 2021 were driven a little bit more by other public schools, which means they left the area, but also non-public. So they chose a different education system for their children. So this was the November board meeting presentation that Mr. Hummel provided. Again, this is a live link for anyone who missed it. But we did want to provide, the board had asked about which schools had lost. And, you know, overall, we're looking at a 7.7% over those 2 years. But the big takeaway for us as a team when we're modeling this is the average grade band has decreased. You know, in 2019, the fall of 2019, we had an average of 280 students in each grade. Now we have 257 students in each grade. And, you know, that's pretty powerful. Whenever you're thinking about our graduating classes, you know, they're getting that much smaller every year. And a portion of that loss is the variance between the exiting 12th graders and the incoming kindergartners. And it's just a function of our reality.
I think that's the most disheartening part of our enrollment problem, is we see no there's no place we can say, okay, here comes large classes through.
No.
That's gonna fix this. They
No.
continually dwindle
Yeah.
every step of the way. And that becomes, the most, challenging problem that we face, is it's not going away anytime soon.
No. And we were, as we were planning and working on this slide, a lot of the people in this room have graduated from Garrett County Public Schools, either Southern or Northern. And if you think about your graduating class and how many people were in your graduating class, and now we look at the averages that we have over the last 5, 8, 10 years, it's very telling, the decline. And, to your point, Mr. Glatfelty, there are a number of reasons, certainly. And we usually only show the trends over the last 10 years, but if we look, it is more over the last 20 to 25 years. It has been a steady decline. It's just been exacerbated by a number of factors in the last few years.
Well, declining birth rate and.
Sure. People moving away,
Less
people having
children
less
for family,
children, yes,
all that.
exactly. But if you do remember from that presentation, there were a significant number of losses to other school districts, people moving away from the area. Thank you, I just wanted to clarify.
And then another one of our, the components of this perfect storm is the changes to the capital improvement plan at the state level. So our staff takes great pride in our buildings. They take care of them as if they're their own homes. They maintain them to the best of their ability. But there comes a point in time where even with your own home, you have to renovate something, or you have to replace a portion, a roof, the tile in your kitchen. There are things that you have to do, and unfortunately, Garrett County's buildings are the third oldest in the state of Maryland. So, those factors are converging here. The state's participation in capital projects right now, the good news is that we are at a 90-10 split with the state and local share. However, the state is very data-driven on how they're investing those state funds in local education associations. So they are looking at a declining student enrollment. The Maryland Department of Planning provides those numbers to the IAC as they're making their decisions. When they look at our underutilization, they start asking questions about adjacent schools, as Mrs. Baker was indicating. They're asking those questions. Why are you not considering filling up this school, and then you wouldn't have to replace that roof? We did have this past fall, we had our first project that was not approved because of underutilization. So that has, that was another driving factor in this plan. The 90% participation could change through the legislative session. It's written into law right now, but every legislative session it could change. And again, we have current challenges with our facilities beyond roofs and boilers and HVAC systems. We still have open space, instructional space that needs to be enclosed for the instructional quality, but also for safety. We still have buildings that need safety vestibules, and we have a large initiative that we really believe that air conditioning should be in all of our buildings. If we're replacing roofs and mechanical systems, we will never afford to get to enclosing the open space or providing air conditioning to our buildings.
Or any other interior renovations that would improve educational opportunities or programs.
because we would be constantly another roof, another HVAC, and then when we had those replaced, it would be time to start on another cycle. So we would never get to an interior renovation that would improve opportunities, educational opportunities. It would always be exterior building systems.
And we would also have to account for the fact that as our systems age, there's potential for failure at any time on any type of major system. And we cannot, with any definitive measure, know when something is going to fail. We know that it's getting old. We know we're the third oldest buildings in the state, but it's important to understand that you know, within that model, there's potential for major system failure that is also going to potentially have to be addressed.
You said we had a project not approved as well. What was that? I don't remember.
It was the roof at Accident Elementary.
And that was the state, correct, for people listening?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's some other factors also to consider. You heard me reference earlier the all resources to ensure all students are successful. One area that we have to look very closely at is our students with disabilities and ensuring that we're meeting all of their needs. And even taking out the blueprint requirements that are coming in the future, given our current situations and current requirements and current blueprints, it's becoming an increasingly difficult puzzle to put together as far as a staffing plan and ensuring that we're being efficient and effective with how we move forward with providing services to students with disabilities. As you know, we are required by federal law to ensure that students' needs are met in this area. So this slide details several areas that impact primarily our staffing plan, but also other challenges that we face with the current footprint, which will be exacerbated as we move forward with some of these other factors that are coming together. The first one is looking at our related service providers. Those are individuals such as speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, teachers of visually impaired. Those individuals are spread extremely thin across 12 schools. What that also means is that it requires a significant amount of travel in order to ensure those services are met for those students. So that obviously is a tricky puzzle to put together for Dr. Mangus. And each year it gets more and more challenging to make sure that we have all of those services met.
Yeah. The other thing that I will add to that is that even if we had enough money to have a person that could be dedicated to all 12 of our schools, we can't find the qualified individual to deliver that service. In this area, we cannot find enough of the qualified people. And so even if we had enough money to hire all of them, the supply is not enough.
Right.
So it's not just a revenue issue, it's also a supply and demand issue.
And I think, you know, we talked about the way our buildings are maintained in Mr. Wazowski's department. You know, they do a phenomenal job taking care of our buildings. Dr. Wilderson does a phenomenal job recruiting and advertising and all of those things to attract teachers to our area. And it used to be that it was not an issue. It really was a non-factor for most of my career with Garrett County Public Schools, but it is becoming a very serious factor. Not only special education teachers, but a number of other specialized, but I think special education teachers are some of our most difficult right now that we're not able to find. Not for lack of effort, though. I want to make sure
Absolutely.
we say that.
Absolutely. And yes, I know that Dr. Wilderson is always out looking. I know Dr. Mangus works with her contacts as well to try to find highly qualified people. That really does talk to bullet number 2 there. And you know, we have had positions unfilled. That has happened this year, and we've had to look at long-term subs. And I will say, special education tends to be one of those hard-to-fill areas. Math is another one, science is another. So, I mean, there are certain areas in education that are a little more challenging to fill. Special education is one of them, but it is a critical area, and we want to make sure our students are receiving the best from the best. I will also say that when we think about our staffing and how it spreads in, you know, with our current footprint, we do have some schools with very small numbers of students receiving specialized services. In some cases, 2 or 3 students who qualify. And while in a larger school, we can appropriately group students by services in order to provide the specialized instruction that they need. In a smaller school with 2 or 3 students, they may be at various grade levels and on completely different skills. So the staffing plan, again, becomes complex, and it oftentimes requires individual services, whereas at a larger facility with more students under the roof, there's a little bit more flexibility and efficiency in being able to provide those services. Right now, we also have teachers that are split between positions. An example that is given here is intervention and special education split role, as well as schools, special education teachers who travel between schools, and so they're providing services at more than one school. And this certainly does require our teachers to be a jack of all trades in some cases, which also creates workload inefficiencies. So, I mean, it's just a number of things that cause us to have to really look at how we're moving forward. Our center programs, you know, we have several of them, elementary, middle, and high. There are limited opportunities for collaboration. Our mileage costs for traveling providers continue to increase. Not all of our facilities are ideal for ensuring access and accessibility. And you can see the areas that are most noted in the special education world. And we have an increased number of preschool age students with disabilities requiring individualized education plan services. And we are required to, we as the public school system are required to do that if they are on an individualized education plan, which spreads all of those services that I've already referenced even thinner.
Oh, can you explain what center programs are?
The center programs, so Dr. Mangus, I think you would be the best person to explain it. I could do it, but I think that you would be better. So
when we're talking center programs, mainly we're focusing on our ALO program, which stands for Alternate Learning Outcomes. These are students that are working on adaptive curriculum, generally on a certificate of completion. And so we have Yachtways on the southern end of our center school at the elementary level, Accident on the northern end of our center school. But it's just challenging for them, and they've even shared that concern with me, to collaborate with other ALO teachers to get ideas and strategies to implement with their students. We also have the ALO programs at each middle school and each high school, but at the elementary level, they're only at Yachtways and Accident Elementary. Although it's not specific to special education, our STARS programs is another example of one of those center programs where we have one at Broadford and one at Grantsville Elementary. And so it really limits their ability to easily collaborate amongst each other. And we have created opportunities where they can have those opportunities to collaborate either during a PD day or after school, but it's still very, very challenging.
Okay.
Yeah.
great.
I have one just like for to understand. You have one that not all facilities are ideal for ensuring access and accessibility. You have bathrooms, playgrounds, kitchens for transition services. So what about the playgrounds? Can you explain that? I mean, I know we have several that did the ADA compliance. So what are we missing?
Yeah, so Rich and I have been working, and please, to make sure that all of our playgrounds are ADA accessible. And there's multiple layers to that. So one of the things that Rich has really implemented with his team is making sure that the
pea gravel is no longer in our playgrounds, and that it's removed so that students that have wheelchairs can easily get through, the new wood chips. But that's just one layer. Like, it's then adding the equipment that is, meeting the needs of all of those students. We've also had requests for fencing around some of our playgrounds for students that may elope. And so it's not necessarily, I was careful on the wording on this because it's not necessarily that we're not in compliance with ADA, but just being able to fully meet all of those students' needs at every school can obviously cause a fiscal burden.
Okay, what about the kitchens for transition services? Where should we have kitchens at?
So this is just something that, similar to, like I spoke about earlier in the ALO program, those students that are working on adaptive life skills, it's really important for us to prepare them for post-secondary. So for them, those are skills like independent living and adapting to different environments. And so some of the skills that we focus on within the classrooms are hygiene, preparing meals, doing those type of transition services, using public transportation to get to and from places that's needed, collaborating with other individuals, calling for help, those type of things. So some of our classrooms have, large bathrooms, some of them have kitchens in them, but not all of them do. And so just, if given the opportunity, it would be wonderful to have those in all of our ALO programs to really maximize that instruction there for the students.
So it's not necessarily just for secondary schools. You're talking also for elementary then, for the kitchen?
Yes. It would be more appropriate for middle and high school. Our middle and high school students definitely use those more frequently. But even at the elementary level, we're doing some of those more basic kitchen skills as well. Setting tables.
Okay, thank you.
I think you'll notice some similarities with this slide, which really looks at student services, and again, the complexities that we're facing now before we even consider the blueprint. On the left-hand side, you will see the required services that school systems are to have as we look at ensuring that we have appropriate crisis and emergency services and individual group and classroom support. And these are kind of overarching categories. Under mental health services and support would include roles like counselors, school psych, social workers, mental health coordinators. And under behavior would of course include behavior supervisor, behavior support teachers, our STARS teachers and assistants. But on the right, you will see several challenges that we're currently facing. One of which includes that our daily and responsive services are spread thin over all 12 schools. For example, one social worker is serving 6 schools. So obviously, and we also have several counselors and behavioral support that are serving multiple schools. So obviously, one person serving 6 schools, that is going to obviously contribute to a lot of travel, but also limited ability to be there on a day-to-day basis. It also sets our system up to have somewhat of a reactive response model. So when emergencies do happen, because we aren't able to have full-time services daily at every single building, based on the limited population, the fact that our schools are spread out so far, when there is a significant mental health issue or crisis, it does require deployment, which some of our response times can be quite lengthy, especially if you're coming from the southern end and trying to get to Route 40. So that model is a model that we would like to shift to be more proactive and ensure increased day-to-day support, but it's been proven to be very challenging to do in the current footprint and staffing models. We also have, again, limited opportunity for collaboration amongst mental health roles because they are spread thin and having to go to the various schools. It's not often that they're all in the same spot. And again, the same challenge of finding highly qualified mental health, behavior, and health staff with the required education and training has also proven to be a challenge. on a regular basis. So, and then finally, our nursing staff, we have a tremendous nursing staff. All of these positions really have done tremendous work through the pandemic, but our nurses have been on the front line of many things when we consider the pandemic, and we have been able to have a nurse at every location through federal COVID money, and that has been a huge blessing, and they have done tremendous work, and they're really go-getters. I really can't say enough about them, but certainly we did not have a nurse in every single building pre-pandemic because our footprint has some very small schools, and the enrollment, we weren't able to have full-time daily nurses. So as we move forward, as funding expires, that is a significant concern.
So on this slide, we're talking about our recommendation of a system-wide grade band configuration of pre-K to 6 and 7 through 12. And we are working currently and will continue to work as we work with the board as we move through each phase of these recommendations. We will provide some of the requested information and certainly any other information that you need to make your decision. But some of those things include the instructional benefits and the challenges. We've really tried to focus this evening's presentation on some of those benefits and challenges, but we know there are other considerations in the ensuring that we're being as transparent as we possibly can. We know that with a change in the grade band alignment, some schools would no longer be needed, so we would be looking at consolidation, so we would be looking at a new proposed footprint, so we're including that, but certainly we would provide any new information as we move through that process. We would provide facility utilization estimates, so you would be able to see, depending on which schools are consolidated and each phase is impacted or enacted, you know, what those school utilization would look like, any budget impacts, savings, or things that would be necessary to change the grade band alignment. For instance, work at both high schools would be necessary to include the 7th and 8th grade. So that would certainly be a budget impact, but we look at that as spending some money to gain efficiencies as we go, you know, over the next 10 to 20 years of our school system. And then certainly the recommended timelines. Each phase of this plan would require community meetings and feedback sessions. And so each timeline would include those so that we are within our own policy and ensuring that we are seeking feedback for each phase of the timeline. So this is just an overview of things that we are working on for your information. We will continue to provide that through these presentations publicly each month and present any other information that you need.
Okay, so when we look at instructional benefits, the lead team, members of the lead team work together to brainstorm several instructional benefits specific to the proposed model, which again is the pre-K through 6th grade band and 7 through 12. The first is looking at increasing the equity in our class sizes and offerings across the county. One example of that, right now, when you look at current class sizes, there are situations where we have some classes that are ranging anywhere between 11 to 14 students. This is an example at the elementary level, while others in other schools are in the high 20s, 27, 28, and 29. And certainly there's a pretty big disparity between a class size of 11 or 12 and 27 and 28. So that in and of itself is something that we really feel is important to address. And certainly if you would combine those two classes, it would be a class size of anywhere between 20 to 24, which is a very standard appropriate class size. So that's just one example of how this plan would, this proposed footprint will help us be more equitable in our class sizes across the county. We also anticipate it allowing increased opportunity for collaboration, job-embedded PD, and vertical alignment. It really does put us into a situation where almost all grade levels would have a partner teacher, you know, where rather than having singleton kindergarten teacher or singleton first grade teacher, there may be 2 or 3 within the same building. And that certainly allows for enhanced collaboration, oftentimes common planning, opportunity for PLCs, and also provides an opportunity for shared workload, which ultimately allows for increased capacity. We do believe it will allow for greater flexibility for innovation specific to the blueprint, as when you have more students under one roof, it does allow for greater flexibility and opportunities. One example of that would be for the remediation and acceleration models that we are going to be required to have, that I noted earlier, under the blueprint model. It would allow 8th grade to fully access high school credits as appropriate, which really can support both an accelerated model as well as a remedial model. For those who are ready for more rigorous coursework, it obviously gives them access to it quicker, allowing them to bank credits and also allowing time to be freed up later in their high school career when they could be taking more dual enrollment courses as well as AP courses. Certainly, if a student is going to earn their associate's degree, they are going to need to start dual enrollment classes quickly. It's not going to be something that you're going to be able to wait until 11th grade and more than likely meet. So being able to get those access to credits sooner allows more time to be able to meet those higher level CCR post pathways. It also addresses the remedial model from the perspective of if a student can bank a high school credit in 8th grade, let's say it's a fine art or an elective of sorts, that frees up time then when they are in high school, if they are not CCR, to be able to put in a remedial course or remedial opportunity for them. This model, we also anticipate, will allow for more flexibility to potentially add course offerings and redesign opportunities for students. It certainly would support a more efficient use of our staff and likely allow for more frequent opportunities of certain courses. You know, so at the high school level, sometimes courses are not offered every year if a certain number of students are not in need of that course, or there's not enough students to justify running the course. It may not be offered every year. So certainly this would allow us to offer more frequent opportunities. It also could allow us to look at models to, as far as adding programs, maybe consider increasing a foreign language opportunity or increasing an AP offering that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise because of our current footprint and challenges. It also can increase potential for program building. And what this bullet is really referencing is in situations like, for example, fine arts, this would allow flexibility with 7th through 12th grade in one building to be able to assign a teacher, the same teacher, to teach, let's say, for example, band, 7th through 12th grade. So there'd be a very strong continuity of instruction that could occur, allowing for increased capacity within the program. We do believe, obviously, we are shrinking the blueprint, or the footprint with this proposal. It should decrease many traveling positions. The ones that come to mind right away would be resource teachers at elementary school, guidance counselors, speech, social workers, and other roles. We have many traveling teachers going to multiple schools on a regular basis, and this certainly would decrease this significantly. It also would allow for greater service implementation. This model offers greater flexibility in staffing and schedule. We have questions?
I do.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I didn't know if you was talking about. Looking at it, it looks good on paper, increased equity in class size and offerings, but to me, I think that's kind of a hard thing to kind of control your class size. Like, you might have a school right now that at full capacity, it may have 29, 28 kids in one grade level, it might only have 15 or 16. It's not, the school would be full, so you can put you're saying, basically, that we might have more control on the amount of students in a class. I mean,
The more students you have in a building, the more you can distribute things evenly. When you have a singleton school and you only have a class size, when I say singleton, I mean one classroom per grade. You may have 11 students in first grade. There's obviously, unless you're going to do a combination class, which could be a serious consideration as we move forward in the current footprint, there are no other students to put in that class. But if that grade was over in this other school, let's say school A has the first grade class of 12, school B over here has the first grade class of 27, if they came over, you'd be able to equal out. You'd go into two classes of somewhere around 20. Because you have more people under one roof, it gives you flexibility to be able to do that.
basically what you're saying is maybe you had 30 kids, you might not really want to separate them into two classes, you might keep 30 kids in one class. But you might have 45 in another grade, so you could separate 23 and 22 in the class, you're saying. You would have that control to do that. Like, you might not have, kind of what you said, you might not have enough students, or you might have, again, say, you might have 30 students in third grade, you have 2 third grade classrooms. Well, you might not want to, what you said, if I understood correct, you might not want 2 classes of 15, you might keep all 30 students together. Or,
we'd analyze that.
but I mean,
in our
that's because it's kind of hard to control the amount of kids in each grade level. I mean, we can't.
Well, you have your enrollment. You have your enrollment. So it's basically your economies of scale. So in a large building like Broadford, for example, you have your enrollment, and you may have in first grade you may have 75 kids. In second grade you might have 80 kids. In third grade you might have 90 kids. It's going to be different in every grade level.
Right.
We would look at those numbers, and then we would make staffing allocations specific to those numbers that we felt would be appropriate and to meet the students' needs.
And that is an exercise that we do every year, but we don't have the flexibility to be able to make adjustments in very many places. And, you know, there have been years where Broadford has had 3 classrooms of a certain grade because that grade was a little bit smaller. Then there was a time where we had 5 classrooms at Broadford for a specific grade because it was bigger. And so by being able to bring the students together, you might have 2 second grade classes, but because of the particular makeup of third grade, it might be the same amount of students, but you might have to divide them by 3 because of something that's happening within that group. And this would give us the autonomy to be able to put in a third teacher to loop with that group of kids. Right now, we don't have that flexibility in the singleton schools.
And this is all, what we're talking about is based off if you did there's a lot of information here that we've just got. If you did the K through 6, 7 through 12th grade? Is that what it is? Or pre-K through 6, 7 through 12?
7 through 12.
But
that's what we're recommending. We're recommending pre-K through 6 and 7 through 12 system-wide.
But to close some schools possibly, elementary schools, to get.
Yeah.
Okay. And then my next question on that, on the second part of that, provides flexibility to potentially add course offerings and or redesign opportunities for students. Okay, this one, I guess I'm looking at it, our course offerings are more secondary school, right? Because elementary, the students don't pick what they want, basically. You do your gym, your music, your art, you have your classroom, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So this would be maybe more, what, the 7th through 12th that we're referring to?
More than likely. Mm-hmm.
But not particular, not necessarily. You know, we might have we used to have a German option in middle school. We may have a Spanish experience in elementary now. You know, it gives us an opportunity to do some different things that we've never been able to do before.
Or additional drama or additional musical opportunities at the elementary and middle school. I think we are talking a lot about middle and high school, 7 through 12, but there could be a number of opportunities at the elementary level. I don't think we should,
Right.
Well, it's not very clear, so that's why I'm asking.
One example at the elementary level that could be considered that I think would be very valuable would be looking at our model for implementing talented and gifted services. So that would be a model that I would go to if you were asking me where we could expand or where we could have a potential increase in course offerings or opportunities for students. That's one of the first ones that I
We
would.
dedicate classes for those things.
Yes.
As we had years ago.
and we're meeting the letter of the law for gifted and talented.
We are.
But it is at the bare minimum, right? I mean, to reach the letter of the law.
Correct.
I think there are a number of opportunities that we could implement in our elementary schools to meet that if we had pooled our resources.
Okay, my last question was before you go to the next slide. If I guess where I'm coming from, it makes sense what you said for elementary, but I'm thinking this we're talking about is if it would be 7 through 12. You're saying possibly more course offerings. Well, I believe over time we've taken away some course offerings, and it goes by the comments have been declining enrollment, funding for some of these positions, different things. So I'm just kind of trying to understand that we would still have secondary school open to the county. You would just be putting your 7th and 8th graders in there. So I'm just trying to.
So in some cases, 8th graders would then be eligible for high school credit, which would increase your population within those high schools by a whole grade for the classes that they would be eligible for. So that's one example of increasing the population to be able to add course offerings. I don't feel that these can be taken in isolation, really. I mean, it is an interconnected plan, and the plan in its totality offers the system flexibility to be able to grow into the future. And this is just, I'm speaking my opinion right now, if we don't look at some of these options and take seriously some consideration for making some significant changes, we're going to limit our ability to grow into the future, because we're going to be forced into limiting it. And we will be at the bare minimum, as Ms. Baker said, for multiple programs, and we will be only providing the mandatory, not all of the other experiences that we know we need to be able to provide.
And a worst case scenario, to be compliant with the blueprint.
Right.
We may struggle to even be compliant.
Right.
Oh, there's a number of them, but.
And I appreciate your questions. I hesitate to answer too individually because they interconnect. A lot of these points interconnect. If one thing doesn't happen, it doesn't provide necessarily the flexibility we need to be able to do another thing. Does that make sense?
It does, but from my standpoint, like, I'm a person, if you want to tell me something, you got to sell it to me. I got to understand these points to,
Sure.
You know, the more information you give me, the more I understand it, and the more I'm going to sell it to me.
Sure.
And I'm sure people listening are probably having some questions I might be asking or even
Sure.
more. So that's why I'm asking for clarification.
Sure.
You know, because this is your language. You put it
Right.
together.
Right.
Like, so that's why I'm asking.
No, and I think they're good questions. I just want you to be aware that it
Right.
is interconnected.
I'm sure we're gonna hear a lot more details of how this is gonna be done in the future, and I think that's what Monica is getting at. I mean, people, you know, it's hard to just look at this broad outline of what you need to do or what you're recommending. To be able to really make a good decision on it, we're gonna need more detailed information.
And I think that goes back to the slide where we had the other considerations. As we move through each phase, we will absolutely this is an overview, to start the process. But certainly we have more information that we will provide at each phase.
Right. And also some of this will play out as we implement the blueprint, which remember is a 10-year implementation plan. So it is going to take some time for us to be able to do that as well. So.
Just a point, I think it's probably important that we get through the presentation and through questions afterwards, because I think for the public that hasn't seen this yet, we're talking about some stuff that hasn't been brought up yet, that I think would be helpful to get through the slides first and then go to questions.
Yeah, we've been over an hour, so we're gonna lose our audience probably.
Okay.
Move forward.
So the next slide just continues on instructional benefits. Certainly believe that this offers greater flexibility in staffing and scheduling. Certainly a pre-K through 6, 7 through 12th grade model offers one less transition between grade bands for students, increasing continuity of learning. It does create more resources under one roof to support students, allowing daily access to support. That could allow for those full-time services that we talked about earlier that are a significant challenge in order for us to be able to provide those services. It also allows at the elementary level, as I was talking earlier about the partner teachers, more than one teacher at each grade level, allows for an opportunity for departmentalization as well, and thus allowing the teacher to specialize in certain content areas. It will provide the renovations necessary to meet all of the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements in upgraded facilities, we'll say. And it also creates an opportunity for more targeted approaches for transition for special education, which starts at age 14, and all elementary schools would be on the same consistent grade band model, providing opportunities for all students to be at their home schools. There are a number of challenges that we'll have to overcome as well. One significant one is the disruption to the system. We certainly, we are not minimizing, there will be concern over unfamiliar grade bands, unfamiliar locations, renovations, school closures, of course. It will require complex scheduling, staffing, and curriculum conversations. It does reduce the small community feel within our schools, and there may be a fear of having younger children potentially interacting with older children.
So, throughout this process, and we've certainly heard from members of the board, members of the community, other things that we've considered before bringing this recommendation of grade banding to you this evening. We have explored a pre-K to 2, 3 to 6, 7 to 12. Certainly single high school has come up in a number of discussions. Redistricting has come up in a number of discussions, not only within each southern and northern, but also moving the line north, from the northern end, moving it south. We looked at a pre-K to 6 model, a pre-K to 8 model, and certainly all of the options that were included in the presentation by Dr. Lever. I believe this one most closely mirrors is option B. And certainly we've looked at, keeping the existing footprint and what that would mean, in the next 5 to 10 years for our school system. And through all those considerations, this is how we come to the conclusion of the presentation this evening of a recommended footprint of pre-K to 6 and 7 through 12. If we are to do nothing and keep the current footprint, these are a few of the implications. They are by no means a comprehensive list of everything that we would be looking at, but it is very important to note that we would have an increase to class size. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Dr. Miller has already explained that to some extent. We would have significant program cuts, similar to things we've had in the future, and I think this goes to what you were questioning, Mrs. Rinker. You know, some of the programs that we've cut were also a lack of interest, but in previous years, as Mrs. Schweitzer said, you know, we've cut out German and French at the middle school level, we've cut out some foreign languages at the high school level, childcare, masonry, driver's education. There's a list of things that we've had to cut over the years for a number of reasons. That will only increase if we do not make some very serious footprint decisions moving forward. We would definitely be needing to look at some combination classes in our smaller schools. We would have to really weigh out any mandated things that are included in the Blueprint for Maryland's Future or any other mandates, and then look at things that are unmandated, and we would have to eliminate a number of things that possibly be unmandated. And one of those that always comes up is transportation for athletic events, field trips, those kinds of things. None of us want to do that. But there, you know, as we said, with the perfect storm that we are facing right now, some of these things would have to be explored. My entire team, and I thank them all for being here this evening, and certainly Mr. Wazlowski and Mrs. Schweitzer work most closely with the IAC, but we know, as we said earlier, they've already denied one project. We feel that we will not be able to continue to access that 90-10 good fortune that we've had if we do not work very closely with the IAC. We have to work with them and not against them, and certainly bringing those representatives here for presentations on exactly what is required and what they would consider and would not. And then, as I said earlier, and we've talked about all evening, it would significantly reduce our ability to do the programmatic transformation that we are going to be required with the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. So we would be required to look at a number of things that we do not have to do, to put it in very simple terms. So this next slide, I know when this presentation went public, I know there are already people that are reviewing this. This is a recommended footprint by the year 2025 or later, should the board decide to move at a slower pace. The numbers that you see in blue and red do not represent anything other than a number. It does not represent year or anything like that. At this juncture, we would be recommending one high school, 7 to 12, one Northern Elementary, grades pre-K to 6, and Grantsville Elementary, grades pre-K to 6. And you'll see in very small print, but this presentation will be available, is available publicly and will be on our website. And then in the red, Southern Garrett High School being a 7 to 12, the Southern Area Elementary to be determined a pre-K to 6, Yawk-Lace Elementary pre-K to 6, and Crellin Elementary pre-K to 6. Now, Crellin Elementary, we would be reevaluating that probably after the year 2025 or as we move through this process. Right now, there's about 33% greater enrollment in the Southern End schools than in the Northern End schools. So right now, if we were to try to make it a little more even, both north and south, we would face some overcrowding at our Southern Area Elementary and Yawk-Lace Elementary. So at this juncture, it's necessary for Crellin to remain as a pre-K to 6. We would, right now, they do not have a pre-K, so we would be looking to expand that for a number of years until we can reevaluate our enrollment numbers moving forward. That I know is a very, very aggressive footprint, and we will continue to provide documentation and data to support this recommendation, and get feedback, as I said, from the community, from stakeholders, and certainly from the board and the public, moving forward.
Okay, so within this recommendation, we have provided some utilization estimates. And I want to caution the board as well as the public that this is the best case scenario. So that we believe this is a high enrollment scenario. The assumptions that are made within this model are that pre-K and kindergarten are an average of the prior 5 years. So we know, though, that those class sizes are getting smaller, but it's an average of the last 5 years. Grades 1 through 8 are rolled forward with no regression. Again, we know that students are leaving our system, but we have assumed that all of them are moving from one grade to the next with no one leaving. Then 9th through 12th grade was our pre-pandemic regression percentages. Northern High School is 1.5% per year, and Southern High School is 2% per year. This is the same model that we have been using for the past 5 years. We meet with our principals in the fall every year and share this trend data with them. So we have the current utilization on the left. In the center column, we have as if there was no change in the footprint. At the very bottom, you can see that by the school year 24-25, we believe that we would be at a 56.3% utilization. With the recommended changes, and this is for 24-25, so at this time, Southern Middle School would be closed for renovations, so that's why you're not seeing any numbers in the Southern Middle School line. We would be looking at 65.9%. Now, when Southern Middle School would be renovated and it would become the new Southern Elementary School, those post-renovation percentages would go to about 79.2% utilization across the system by taking out those 706 seats at Broadford. Now, the Northern Middle School building, the Northern High School building, and the Southern High School building would all have to have state-rated capacity recalculated. So the numbers we have there, we just pulled across, but the way that state-rated capacity works is it depends on the use of the room. So you provide a map with what is in that room, and if the room meets a certain square footage and it is used in a certain way, then there's a certain number that is assigned to how many students should be occupying that space. So I do want to caution that those buildings would have different state-rated capacity than what we have in that blue section. Also, it does appear that Grantsville does look like it may be over capacity, as well as Yacht Glades. Again, we believe this is the best case scenario. We have run the numbers, and we believe that all the students would fit in these schools. Also, Yacht Glades, at this time, school year 24-25, the special ed center is still at Yacht Glades. So when the new Southern Elementary School opens, those alternative learning classrooms would move over, freeing up additional space at Yacht Glades. This is also assuming that we would add a 4-classroom portable to Crellin Elementary School. And it includes the 200 seats in the modulars at Broadford Elementary. All right, are there any questions about the assumptions of this estimate? Okay. So we've also provided for the board some estimated budgetary impact. So on the left, we have provided some numbers on reductions or the board's ability to reallocate some funding. These are estimates, and they're comprised of some positions, some fixed costs that we know we would not have, with a reduced footprint, but we're looking at about $3 million annually to the operating budget in savings. Additionally, we have estimated that there would be a capital budget savings of $7.9 million. That's over $2 million for our local government, and it's $5.85 million for the state government. That would be eliminating the buildings that we're proposing that would be closing and all of the systemic renovations that are currently on the board-approved capital improvement plan. On the right, you'll see that there are some expenses that would be required if this footprint were adopted, if this grade band were adopted. We're estimating $500,000 to install portables at Crellin Elementary School. There would be no state participation in those portables. However, the limited renovations at Southern High School and Northern High School, as well as Northern Middle School to become the new Northern Elementary School, those projects do qualify for state participation at a 90-10 split. So we're estimating that we could see in capital alone a net savings to the local government of $1.5 million and the state government of $5.4 million. The estimates for the limited renovations come from Dr. Lever. He presented these estimates in his December presentation to the board.
Okay, the next several slides detail the recommended timeline to this proposal. This school year, I believe most everybody knows that we are in the middle of a Grantsville enclosure project, and that's currently taking place as I speak. And we know that we are going to have to complete educational specifications and a feasibility study to renovate the Southern Middle School building if we're going to be able to be ready for the capital improvement plan in the fall for approval. In the school year 22-23, we would be looking at planning for the Route 40 and Swan Meadow consolidation. That would obviously include the public meetings referenced earlier in line with policy 940 on school closures. We would also be looking at the architectural engineering design for the Southern Elementary, which would be the Southern Middle School building renovation. School year 23-24, there's a lot under this school year. We would be looking at relocating Route 40 students, pre-K through 5, to Grantsville Elementary School, Swan Meadow students, kindergarten through 5, to Yacht Glades Elementary School, and students in grades 6 through 8 to Southern Middle School. We would continue the work on the architectural and engineering design for the Southern Elementary, and we would renovate the high school spaces for 7th and 8th grades, as well as Northern Middle School building for the pre-K through 6th grades, specific to the Northern Elementary. We would need to install the portable units at Crellin that year, and we would need to plan for the consolidation of Accident and Friendsville to Northern Elementary, again following policy 940. And we would also need to plan for all of our 6th graders to be remaining at elementary schools during that year. School year 24-25, before I get into the bullets underneath this timeline here, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this is a pivotal year in this proposal. This year, school year 24-25, is when we see several things converging, one of which will be a pretty substantial funding cliff. Our federal funding specific to recovery will be coming to a close at that time. So we are anticipating that will be a very challenging budget year. It also is a time when the career ladder has to be established. And at this time, MSCE's projected timeline for implementation of the College and Career Ready post-CCR pathways and support and supplemental programs also are required to go into place and be active in this year. Prior to this year, we will be planning in planning phases at the state level and the local level. But this is the year when it all has to happen. And as you can see underneath in the bulleted areas, this would also be the year that 7th and 8th grade would move to the high school. Friendsville and Accident, including the 6th grade, would move into the Northern Elementary School, which would also include the STARS and Special Education Center for the northern end. 6th grade would remain at all elementary schools. We would shift one pre-K class from Younglades to Crellin, and construction would begin on the Southern Middle School building for Southern Elementary. The following year, construction would continue on Southern Elementary, and planning for closure of the Broadford School building would need to occur. And then finally, in school year 26-27, the current Broadford Elementary students would occupy the renovated school that is currently the Southern Middle School campus. And we would shift the Special Education Center from Younglades to the Southern Elementary School as well that year. One thing that's not captured on this timeline, but we are aware of it, that I just want to make sure that is noted in our 5-year strategic plan that is approved by the board. We are also aware of the need to propose a recommendation for the central office. So that is something that is in the approved strategic 5-year plan that we're aware of, but it's not included in the timeline at this time because it is interdependent on some of the decisions that happen within this proposal.
Right, we haven't forgotten it, we know
We
it's
haven't forgotten
in there, we know it's a large consideration, but we haven't, it's not included this evening. So the last slide, and you can certainly see the next steps that we're recommending as far as the next several months. At the March 8th board meeting, that will be the proposed budget presentation. Then we would do 2 public comment sessions right now, scheduled, proposed at Northern Middle School and Southern Middle School. Those dates would be determined. We could even go into early April if we had to, depending on schedules. But certainly before the April 12th board meeting, we at that time provide any additional data that is requested by the Board of Education members and a final recommendation and proposal, and seek that first board action. Then April and May move forward with the ed specs for the renovation of the Southern Middle School building. June through August, continue the work on the feasibility study and the capital improvement plan, and then make sure that we don't go past the October deadline for submission for the state funding in October. So we have a little bit of room in this next step plan. And right now, of course, there are a lot of dates to be determined based on the will of the board moving forward as far as public feedback.
Okay, let's open it up to any questions. Jason?
I have a few, and I don't need answers tonight, so let me make that clear now, because you probably won't have answers tonight. But one, just to follow up on Monica's question earlier, as far as the additional offerings that can happen. I mean, if we can have a list of those by grade level of what those offerings look like and what they may be, so the community is aware of what else may be out there for their students and what they may be able to be involved in.
Okay.
I think also, you know, as we look at the high schools, of course, it looks to be, although the calculation has to be redone, we're still going to be underutilization rate at the high school level. You know, if we have any thoughts about how the state feels about that, even though we're trying to make progress, if we can get examples of districts that recently have gone through this grade realignment, I think that would be helpful. And what did they learn from that experience, or what can we learn from that experience? Like, what did they do right? What did they do wrong? And then the other thing is just, you know, we have the community dates on here. If we could get those set as soon as possible, so we can get those out to the public.
Other questions?
Noted all your questions. Thank you.
And also in March, just so the public knows, there's on March 22nd, there is also another budget meeting that will be a part of the overall considerations. Yes, Roger.
Just a comment. I think the urgency of this is because we have a 90-10 split for construction right now. That could go away next year. So I think what you're trying to do is put a plan in effect that'll lock in that 90-10 split for the next 5 years. Whether we do it or not is another question, but if you don't have it approved by the state, we could go back to a 50-50 split, and then where are we gonna be at if that happens?
The next steps page was built off of backing into that October deadline of providing our projects to the IAC.
Yeah, that's the,
Right, and certainly when we were afforded that opportunity, one of the board goals was to ensure we get as much done under that 90-10 as we possibly can. And so, yes, that is part of the urgency here, along with, the other factors, but that certainly, we don't know when that could come to an end, and we do want to take advantage of every dollar that we can. But also remembering we have to get them approved.
it's a shame that when we got the 90-10 split, it took care of the local funding issue to a certain degree, but now the state is paying 90%, they're a little bit more critical on what they're gonna fund. And so, here we are back in the same spot we were.
Yeah.
Just a different funding sources, probably.
Well, again, we've not had a lot of interaction with county commissioners as to what our plan is. I'm sure this is probably new to them as well, in terms of what their participation rate's gonna be as well. They're gonna have skin in the game as well. So, it's certainly something we have to work with them as to what their thoughts are about our plan going forward.
Yeah, we probably need to add that, very soon into the next steps, right?
I agree. Well, sooner rather than later, we need to, and I know we have the public presentation of the overall
Budget initiatives, as we always do, but we probably do need to add a date there for the next steps as well.
Good one.
I do. You know me by now. I guess I'll start the back page and work fast. There's not numbers on them. And the slide we just did, next steps. So possibly by the end of this week, we can have a date, for the public comment, northern middle and southern middle to be put out, so people.
I'll ask Mrs. Brewer to do a poll and find dates that will work.
Okay.
We should be able to doodle maybe even tomorrow.
Yeah,
So we can
exactly.
some dates.
And then you have April 12th, provide final recommendation proposal, seek board action. So what is the action going to be on next month?
At the April 12th meeting?
Yes.
Well, it's been my understanding that the board wants to take action on each step of the proposed plan. So the first thing that we have to decide before we can move forward on anything else will be if you accept the grade band alignment that we're recommending of pre-K to 6 and 7 to 12.
Okay. May I make a suggestion that our April 12th board meeting possibly be at a different location because we possibly could have public comment? Is that correct? I mean, we can't really accommodate many people here, so it probably should be a different location. Oh, and then it's on here, and then I believe Dr. Miller referenced it. The 5-year strategic facilities plan that was approved August 11, 2020. That is true, but it wasn't the majority vote. I just wanted to say that I remember it wasn't a majority vote.
It was a majority vote.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, it was, right, it was 3-2. You're right, Matt, I said it wrong, but it wasn't. Yes,
It's the official action.
yes, that is correct, but I just wanted to get that in there. Okay, on the one presentation, Allison said, estimated budgetary impact. And you were saying how much money if this, was what the final decision was. The pre-K through 6, 7 to 12, closed elementary schools, that we would save the money. She said, what, 2 million to local, almost 6 million to the state. Well, busted capital budget costs eliminate $7,925,000. But when I look at that, we don't have on there, which I guess you probably wouldn't factor that in, would be if Southern Middle is renovated as you stated, the new Southern Elementary School. That's not factored in with this, correct? the money?
Right, because it's net neutral. Like,
Okay.
it is the will of the board to renovate that building, and we're gonna renovate it whether it's this grade band or a different grade band. So it doesn't, there's not a change in, there's no variance in budgetary
There
impact.
is one variant, and the variant is, will the state participate in
Right,
that
I was just
renovation?
gonna, yeah.
They may or they may not participate in that renovation,
Right.
based on the, based on a million factors. And I think that's the one thing that everybody, we need to make sure we understand is, in your discussions with the IAC, your discussions with the IAC, our discussions with the IAC, the game has changed. It's just, it's changed. There are school systems that are getting 5,000 more students every year. Need to build an elementary, a middle, and a high school every year to keep up with it. We're a school system that's losing those kinds, not those kinds of numbers, but significant numbers every year. So the IEC is getting tremendous pressure from the Howard counties, Montgomery counties, the Carroll counties. We want more and more money. We want a bigger piece of pie. We got all the kids. Why should Garrett County get any money? They're losing kids. So, those things we have to all remember that, we're asking for things that other counties are gonna be asking for too.
And I look at this, estimated, and I realize this is just estimated, and you're probably thinking I'm overthinking already, but is this possibly leaving things like it is? This isn't like adding new course offerings or doing other things?
What this is reductions or reallocations.
Okay.
So I'm not saying you will save $3 million. I'm saying the board has the opportunity to reallocate $3 million.
Okay.
So that's what would be creating a Spanish program or a small theater program for 4th and 5th graders. That's the opportunity that we would lose if we didn't take advantage of some sort of remarkable change. $3 million can be reallocated. Right now, we're meeting the minimum of certain things, but we could reallocate what we're doing with the minimum that's all spread out real thin and do different things that might be more enriching. So it's not necessarily a cut. It could be reallocated. It could be a cut. It might have to be a cut. But the other thing to understand about this assumption is that this is if we went straight from the 22 budget that we're currently in, straight to FY 2025. Like with no in-between. And we're gonna have in-between. We're gonna have reallocation. Even when we present the FY 23 budget, you're gonna have reallocation. We have to do it every single year. So this $3 million that the board has this opportunity to reallocate or save is if you went straight from right now, but this year's budget straight to FY 25. Nothing in between, no changes. So you're not going to be able to, in one budget year, see $3 million reconciled to change.
And we have to remember that we're gonna have increased costs, as evidenced by the blueprint, that also will have to be taken into consideration.
In a lot of it, we don't have all the blueprint's still a work in progress.
It's gonna be a 10-year implementation plan.
So each year we learn something different.
But there will be significant reallocation. I mean, we already
Sure.
know there's going to be with the salaries, with the national board certification, with the career ladder, we already know there's going to be significant reallocation. That's just the beginning.
Right. Well, and I just wanted to make sure we captured that in the reallocations. It is program opportunities. It allows us flexibility to increase programs and programmatic structures, but it also is going to have to address some of the mandates in the law that currently, if you go back to the revenue presentation that the Switzer presented,
because we're required to spend in foundation programs, it outlines in the law what the foundation money should cover. And then we have to report that that's what we spent the foundation money on. So right now, we have the autonomy and the flexibility to just pool all of that major state aid funding and spend it where Mrs. Baker recommends it and then the board approves it. And we go on. Now we have to So we're making reallocations right now.
While we're on that page, this is just for more information, time for the board. Could you detail what the assumptions are that you made there? Where those figures came from? Both in the capital budget and the reallocation. So we know exactly what it is we're looking at, what those assumptions are.
Okay.
And then on the other side of the page, what is, so the 1 million to the capital budget, is that 1 million total, or is that 1 million local share?
It's 1 million total. It's 500 for the portables, 400 for the limited renovation, and 100 for the.
So I would like to have kind of a summary of what those renovations look like as well, so that we can figure out. To me, that seems small to what I would expect it to be.
Me too, I'll be honest, I thought it was,
Yeah.
with what things cost today, it just looked like it wasn't enough money.
But to answer your question, I think, Ms. Switzer mentioned earlier, the portables would have no state participation, but the other ones would be at a 90-10.
Yeah, on that part, I understand. And I was just trying to understand if that was the whole figure or if that
We
was
need to clarify that, that makes sense.
split, but I would just like to have details then of what
Sure.
we're looking at there.
And of course, we would probably have to do, and Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, some sort of ed spec relative to the 7th and 8th grade remodel. I mean, so that obviously would have a process on kind of to its own, just like we would be doing for the Southern Middle School building.
Right.
I think we can give more information, but I just wanted to,
Yeah.
I just wanted to let you know that.
If you're making assumptions here, what are those figures based on?
Absolutely.
I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
That's basically what we need to know at this point.
Yep.
And then it's our job to determine and ask other questions.
And as we go forward, there'll be more. Yeah, absolutely.
So your assumption for the $100,000 for, I guess that was the high school?
No, for the.
$100,000.
Middle school. These,
Was that the local share?
No, that's total.
You're thinking that's
that's
the total
total.
share.
And these were all Dr. Lieber's, estimates.
Yeah.
But remember, Northern High School is up, if you so the board approved CIP is a link at the bottom of this slide. And if you look at the board CIP, Northern High School is up for a lot of systemic renovation. And so Dr. Lieber really believed that we could merge a lot of those projects at one time and be able to make some better progress, if you will.
And I think the IAC was receptive to that as well. They understood that, what that picture of Northern High looked like for the next however many years.
Yeah, that was the concern I had, what you're asking. It just seems like the portable should cost more than $500,000 with the cost of inflection of materials.
Well, we're gonna move from Broadford over there, right?
No, because we need them at Broadford to be able to ensure the capacity for students.
Originally, here's, when we first considered those, that was one of the considerations.
For the meeting to be held, and the date will go out later, anybody can come to them, correct? Just because it's Southern, Middle, or Northern, doesn't mean that you have to be done in the county. They are, everybody and anybody's welcome to
You have to
it,
wear a
correct?
mask, but they're open meetings.
Okay?
As long as we're in the mask and we're.
We'll make sure that that is included, that it's not just for Northern Middle or Southern Middle School. That's because those are some of the largest venues that we have, and that would be, a big impact on those two schools. But of course, anyone would be welcome to attend any of them.
And then the IAC, someone will try to get a hold of them so they can do a public presentation, and we could have it at some location also.
I've been in discussion with them. The IAC has had a lot of turnover, much as all of the state agencies have. And he has tentatively agreed to the April 12th board meeting. So
as soon as we know that we need to get that out to the public, that they are aware of it, to listen.
I think we'd like to have that.
We'd like to have that before April 12th.
Before April 12th, because I thought they were gonna be part of the community discussion.
Yeah,
April 12th is too late.
We need to have that.
We'll factor him into coming earlier.
We will.
Because I think
He's the
that,
person who volunteered.
I
He
think-
said, I'll be out front.
but I think that needs to be before we
Okay.
get the community listening
We
sessions,
will-
because that's data that.
But at least, if you can't come to two, at least come to one, we'll advertise that somebody from the IEC will be at this meeting, but be at Northern or Southern,
That makes
wherever.
That makes sense. We will,
I think we should do that. At the board meeting.
I just have one more final question.
Sure.
To make sure I'm clear, and I had asked Ms. Baker to answer it, about that what we are going to take action on next month. She said,
Great.
starting with the grade band, but then I believe.
April.
Sorry, in April. But then I believe it is, the other things too, right? Just not the grade band of pre-K to 6, 7 through 12, is that what she said?
Well, the great band leads us to the decision at Broadford and Southern Middle.
Yeah, those
It
two
leads
kind
us
of-
to that decision.
That leads me to, that does lead me to a process question.
Right.
And I was gonna ask the lawyer, but, I know he's there.
You
But
still there, Brandon?
he might need to look at this, but the process question is this, if we make the assumption that we're closing 7-12, and whatever we do in other elementary schools, and we're gonna be moving Broadford there, we actually are making the decision to close Broadford before we've actually went through any process. So the way I read that policy is that the decision has to be at least 90 days before the closure is planned,
okay.
but you could go through the process for Broadford to look at that now, because you're actually, it's really pretty disingenuous to say, we're gonna do the advisory committees and the, public hearing on Broadford, if we're actually making that decision.
And actually, the IEC has said that that's what you do when you're doing the ed spec. That's part of the ed spec for the new Southern Middle.
Which that would, you
You're
could combine
following
those,
the
yeah.
COMAR
Mhm.
13A, you know, you're following all of that at the same time you're doing the ed spec, because you're using the same kind of community input.
So that does lead to the question then, that as far as process, the decision that we might be making might involve both of those two decisions.
Correct, right, yeah,
The others can't wait till later because they're separate.
Sure.
right. And, you know, and I thank you, because I was gonna get to that point for Mrs. Rinker as well. You know, I don't unilaterally decide what will action items. We work together on what will the action items at the March meeting and the April meeting. We certainly work with the president and the board members. So we will work within whatever the will of the board to take action on any of these items as we move forward. I mean, those are recommended next steps.
Well, the October 24th is
Well,
the
right,
back,
I mean,
we've got to backtrack from there, because if we wait too long, we miss that date.
Exactly. But specifics on what will be action items are certainly
Sure.
worked on together.
Sure. And that's maybe a discussion that we have at our next board meeting.
So we will make sure to get clarification, and if we have to revise the timeline to reflect that, then we will do that.
And so that's where,
Yeah.
we gotta be clear on what decisions we actually are making at this point, that you're tied into, and the others that can come later, there could be different variables that we consider timelines and different things later.
Correct.
But you are actually making that decision at the same time, if that's what we're talking about.
Brandon,
Yes, Tom.
do you have any input on any of the discussion we just had in the last couple of minutes?
Essentially, I've taken notes on it. I just need to double check the policy and talk to Mrs. Schweitzer, and I can certainly get you all a recommendation.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone?
Just an observation on the facility utilization estimates, is that your number for the utilization in the south is actually, the percentage is actually lower, because that includes the 700 or the 706, because those are almost being doubled.
Right, and I explained that.
And I just wanted to make clear that
Right.
percentage actually would be, there'd be more even than it looks here.
Right, it goes to 79%, once you back out those 706. But we had to do it in 24-25, because that's the year when you go much further out there, out in the out years, you're working on averages of averages for those pre-K and K classrooms, And then you're getting artificially high numbers.
Becomes, yeah, it's less and less accurate as to.
Right.
And one last process question. This is 23, 24 at the time. You're renovating the high school spaces and northern middle and staying there, which is fine. But where are those northern middle students? Are they gonna be able to be at northern middle when those renovations are going on? But if you don't have the high school space that's being renovated, where are those students going to be?
And we're doing our scope of work can be done in the summer.
Okay, and that's what this is about here.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, thank you, both of you and everybody else in California. I know there's more than just the two
Everyone.
of you,
Everyone.
but, I know it's a very tedious task. That, as I think we said a couple months ago, the landscape of education in Maryland is changing like it's never been thought of before. And, it's going to change our landscape as well in some way. Regardless of the decision it's made, it will still be different.
Yes.
Okay, well, I bet you're glad you filled in tonight, aren't you?
I told her she would learn a lot, so
Yeah.
I hope she has.
Right, I always have to be honest.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, our last piece of business is our student member report. We got our privilege to have Alexis Shaker here tonight, filling in. So our student members, a little under the weather tonight. So Alexis, I'm sorry, it's 10:10, but the floor is yours for as long as you want.
Thank you. I'm gonna do my best to fill Leah's shoes since she's not here. But since the last time that we met, the student councils have been doing a lot. We had a GCASC General Assembly meeting at Southern Middle School on December 16th. And the attendees learned about time management for final week, which is really important to understand. And then they are also currently working on getting dates together for a March General Assembly meeting. When it comes to the state student councils, the MASC, the legislative session is going to be held virtually this year on Saturday, February 12th. Sarah and Laura, I'm just going to mispronounce their last names.
We know who you mean.
Yeah.
You did very well.
And Haley Wilderson will be the presenters, and there is a MASC executive board meeting Saturday, February 26th. When it comes to the two different student councils in Northern, in January, the council met with Dr. Miller to discuss the Garrett County Public Schools reopening and recovery plan. Along with that, they also held a food drive and they sold wooden roses for Valentine's Day. And they are just now finishing their strawberry fundraiser. And then for Southern, we also met in January with Dr. Miller for the recovery and reopening plan. And we recently donated $100 to the Dove Center. This money came from the money that we raised from the Rockford Light Show back in December. And now we are currently working on planning our winter homecoming. That's going to be taking place this Saturday.
This Saturday?
Yes. Yeah, so we're getting all of the final, preparations done this week. But
Fun.
that's all I really have.
Well, that was worth waiting.
Yeah, we're thinking, oh, it's been that quick.
Yeah.
Any questions, any questions for Alexis? Alexis, once again, thank you for coming.
Thanks.
We wish Leah a speedy recovery, but it was nice to have you.
Any updates from board members? Anything anybody wants to talk about?
I'll have mine out via email.
Yeah, thank you.
Saw that, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone? Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn. So moved by Jason. In a second by Monica. All those in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. We are adjourned.